Chapter 729. High in the sky. The humanoid battle soul was like the ruler of heaven and earth as he stood upright. The terrifying emperor's aura covered the sky and earth, shocking the hearts of countless people. As for Qin Feiyang, who was trapped within the Emperor Divine prison, he was in utter disbelief. This innate ability was similar to Tan Wu's innate ability. However, compared to Tan Wu's gravitational domain, the Emperor Divine prison was even more terrifying. He remembered, Tan Wu's gravitational domain could only suppress a person's speed, preventing them from unleashing their full strength. The Emperor Divine prison, on the other hand, could completely imprison a person. In other words, once one entered the Emperor Divine prison, one would be like a fish on a chopping board waiting to be slaughtered. In terms of quality, it was exactly the same as Dong Xingyang's innate ability. As long as one could bind one's opponent, one would be able to immobilize them in the air. However, whether it was battle techniques or battle souls, there was a limit. If one could break this limit, everything would collapse. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was prepared to break the limit of the Emperor Divine prison. He wanted to let the Emperor know that he was no longer the ignorant young man from back then. Apart from himself, no one else had the right to decide his fate. Boom! His body trembled violently as a wave of fire shot into the sky. Amidst the wave of fire, the palm-sized 9-leaf fire lotus emitted a destructive aura. Even heaven and earth can't trap me, let alone your innate ability. Break! Qin Feiyang roared as his black hair fluttered in the wind. The 9-leaf fire lotus and the crimson sword soul shone brilliantly at the same time. They were like two scorching suns in the sky, so blinding that it was difficult to open one's eyes. Clang! Finally, the crimson sword soul moved. At the same time, the 9-fire lotus leaves fell from the sky. Their auras were like rainbows as they fought against the Emperor's aura. Crack! Suddenly, it seemed as though something had broken. The fire lotus leaves and the crimson sword soul that were in a stalemate with the Emperor Divine prison broke through the prison's restraints and shot toward the Emperor at lightning speed. For a time, the world was filled with a shocking sharpness and killing intent. What? He actually broke through the Emperor Divine prison. Below, the invincible black army's eyes trembled. He was extremely shocked. It was the same for Qin Zhong and the other man. Their master said that Qin Feiyang had a way to break the Emperor Divine prison, but they didn't believe it. But at this moment, he actually managed to do it. What was it that allowed him to possess such a terrifying will? As for the Emperor, it was obvious that he had not thought of this. His expression was somewhat stunned. Even so, Qin Feiyang did not show any mercy. Explode! He shouted again and again. Clang! Rumble! Almost at the same time, 9 fire lotus leaves exploded in front of the Emperor. At the same time, the crimson sword soul slashed at the Emperor with a flaming beast shadow. In an instant, terrifying waves of destructive air surged out in all directions, with this place as the epicenter. At this moment, heaven and earth shook, and the sun and moon lost their light. Qin, he exclaimed, will the Emperor be in any danger? The lethality of the two fighting souls was too terrifying. People of the same realm simply only had the fate of being insta-killed. Don't worry. No matter how strong Qin Feiyang is, he can only hurt the Emperor. I can't kill him yet. The beautiful woman laughed. That's right. After all, His Majesty is an existence that surpasses the Battle Saint realm. In the entire great Qin Empire, other than the Grand Preceptor, no one is his opponent. But I believe that with Qin Feiyang's ability, it is not a problem to force His Majesty to use his full strength. Qin Zhong said. It was as they said. When the dust settled, the Emperor was only injured and his life was not in danger. As for Qin Feiyang, he also knew his own limits and did not expect to be able to kill the Emperor right now. But if the Emperor's cultivation was really only a 3-star battle grandmaster, he would have already died. Tell me, do you regret it now? Qin Feiyang said. The emperor looked coldly at Qin Feiyang and said expressionlessly, "If you can break my Emperor Divine prison again, I will let you go." Boom! As soon as he finished, the human-shaped fighting soul in the air began to grow with the wind. However, in the blink of an eye, a giant appeared in the sky. He wore a dragon robe and a purple-gold dragon crown on his head. He stood in the sky and stepped on the ground, as if an ancient king had descended to the world, emitting a great pressure. Qin Feiyang was bewildered. Boom! Soon after, a vast emperor's aura descended from the sky and shrouded the surroundings. At this moment, Qin Feiyang's body seemed to be frozen. No matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the shackles of the emperor's aura. At this moment, the Emperor Divine prison was several times more terrifying than before. It was only now that he realized that the emperor had not used his full strength before. However, he had already self-detonated the 9-fire lotus leaves of the 9-leaf fire lotus. He could only recover 1 fire lotus leaf every day. In other words, now he could no longer use the 9-leaf fire lotus. The Scarlet Sword soul had just been used and could not unleash its full strength. At this moment, how could he break this tribulation? It seems like you can't break it. A hint of disappointment could be seen in the emperor's eyes. He slowly raised his arm and golden dragon battle, Qi, surged from his fingertips. You really want to kill me? Qin Feiyang stared at him. Stealing the pale fire, trespassing into the imperial palace, murdering the crown prince, offending the emperor. Every one of these crimes is punishable by death. If I don't kill you, where's my aura? The emperor said. His expression was extremely cold. Punishable by death, Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. Haha, suddenly, he laughed. He laughed maniacally until tears streamed down his face. However, his expression was one of despair. In his heart, there was still a sliver of hope. How he wished that the emperor could tell him the truth, or at least say sorry to him. In fact, he would feel better if the emperor only showed a hint of guilt. However, there was none. At this moment, due to the emperor's heartlessness, his last sliver of hope was instantly shattered. The emperor was heartless, and the heavenly Tao was blind. What was there for him to miss? The Emperor Divine prison can imprison all living beings under the heavens, but it can't imprison me, Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang roared at the sky. Boom! A mighty dragon might rushed out from his body. This dragon might was many times stronger than the dragon might emitted by the Emperor's golden dragon fighting soul. In a trance, Qin Feiyang was like a real reincarnation of a divine dragon. What's going on? How could his body release dragon might? The crowd below was surprised, but the beautiful woman's eyes, which were originally slightly dim, were now glowing with a blazing light. And at the same time, the expression on the emperor's face finally changed. There was a trace of surprise. There was also a trace of expectation. From now on, I, Qin Feiyang, have nothing to do with you. Qin Feiyang looked at the emperor. His dark eyes were deathly still. Roar! Before his voice faded, accompanied by a loud dragon roar, a purple-gold divine light rushed out from Qin Feiyang's body and rushed into the sky. The dragon might was even stronger. The people of the imperial palace were all looking up at the sky, at the surging purple-gold divine light. What is that? Why do I feel that a real divine dragon has appeared? Everyone's heart was filled with surprise. The 9-5 Supreme Sovereign is nothing but a joke in my eyes. Qin Feiyang looked at the emperor with contempt. The purple-gold divine light gradually dissipated. At last, a purple-gold divine dragon appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The purple-gold divine dragon was hundreds of feet long, like a majestic mountain range, hovering and dancing in the void. The dragon might was rolling, shocking everyone. This is the purple-gold dragon soul? Qin Zhong exclaimed, stuttering. Not only him, but Qin Yi, the beautiful woman, the Emperor Zhuge the commander of the invincible Black Army, and the princes and princesses were all staring with anger and disbelief. Without a doubt, this was the legendary purple gold dragon soul. The great Qin Empire had existed for 10,000 years, but so far only the first emperor had the purple gold dragon soul. Who is he? Why did he activate the Qin clan's purple gold dragon soul? The second prince screamed hysterically, because only the people of the Qin clan had the chance to activate the purple gold dragon soul. Moreover, the purple gold dragon soul represented a supreme symbol and glory. Swoosh! At this time, Qin Feiyang rushed to the sky and landed on the head of the purple gold dragon soul. He looked down at the emperor and said, "Now, I will show you what the real emperor prison is." Boom! As soon as his voice fell, a shocking aura descended from the sky. It was full of dragon might and emperor might. At this moment, everyone looked at Qin Feiyang and couldn't help but feel a sense of awe in their hearts. They even had the urge to kneel down and worship. It was as if Qin Feiyang was the true overlord, and the overlord standing below him was only a subject. However, what happened next shocked everyone even more. The shocking aura covered the sky and shrouded the entire imperial palace, and anyone who was shrouded by this aura seemed to be imprisoned and couldn't move. Wasn't this exactly the same as the emperor prison? No. To be exact, it was countless times more terrifying than the emperor prison. Not only were their bodies imprisoned, even their blood stopped flowing. Moreover, this aura crazily suppressed them and forced them to kneel on the ground. This is the innate ability of the purple gold dragon soul. I didn't know what to name it, but now I know. It's called the Emperor Prison. Qin Feiyang looked down at the emperor and said indifferently, "Boom!" As soon as these words came out, it was like a clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's mind. One had to know. The word emperor was the monopoly of the emperor, and only the emperor was qualified to use it. But he actually chose this name. Didn't he know that this was blatantly looking down on the emperor's power? To put it more seriously, this was the crime of rebellion. Plop! Finally, some people couldn't control themselves and knelt on the ground, their bodies trembling. Then, the people below continued to kneel down one by one. They didn't want to kneel in their hearts, but they couldn't control themselves. The princes and princesses were also struggling and roaring at this moment. But it was useless. In the end, they all knelt on the ground. They couldn't withstand this pressure at all. They felt that under this pressure, they were as small as ants. And those who were stronger than Qin Feiyang didn't kneel down. After all, their strength was in their eyes. Chapter 730. Then, she looked at the beautiful woman. At this moment, there was nothing else on her face, only gratification and pride. She knew that this child would return one day, but she did not expect that he would return so strongly. With such an outstanding child, what was there to be regretful about? Suddenly, she turned and looked at the emperor with a trace of ridicule in her eyes. "You didn't expect this." After being expelled from the imperial palace, he not only opened the door of potential, but also the purple gold dragon soul. "Now you must be regretting it," she muttered to herself, finally releasing the emotions that she had suppressed for more than 10 years. At this moment, the emperor's body was also trembling, but it was not because of regret, nor was it because of excitement, but because he was forced by the pressure. If he was in his peak state, this pressure would definitely be useless against him. But now he suppressed his cultivation and was in the same realm as Qin Feiyang. Even he could not help but want to worship him. As for his Emperor Divine Prison, it was easily destroyed by Qin Feiyang's Emperor Divine Prison. However, it was clear that his pride and dignity would not allow him to do so. Boom! A terrifying aura burst out from his body. Finally, he released his suppressed cultivation and returned to his peak state. At the same time, his emperor prison's power also increased by countless times. Qin Feiyang was imprisoned again. As the beautiful woman said, even if Qin Feiyang's strength was heaven-defying, he was still not the emperor's opponent, because he was still too weak. But even so, forcing the emperor to use his full strength was enough to make him famous. "You can go now," the emperor said lightly. At the same time, the human-shaped war soul dissipated, and the emperor prison also disappeared. Qin Feiyang's body became light, and the purple-gold dragon soul under his feet automatically dissipated. He looked at the emperor deeply and opened a portal. He had done what he wanted to do. He had also proven what he wanted to prove, so there was no point in staying. "Since you're back, don't leave." However, at this moment, a hoarse voice echoed in the void. Swish! Following that, an old man in white appeared in front of Qin Feiyang. This person had white hair and a white beard. His white robe was spotless, and he had the demeanor of a transcendent being. Looking at the old man, Qin Feiyang's pupils suddenly shrank and were filled with fear. "Greetings, Imperial Tutor." The moment this person appeared, everyone bowed respectfully. Even the emperor had a look of respect on his face. That was right. This person was the state preceptor, the temple lord of the temple, and the emperor's teacher. The state preceptor ignored the others and looked directly at the emperor. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Yes." The emperor nodded and asked suspiciously, "I wonder why the imperial preceptor is here." How could this old man not come and take a look when such a big thing happened? The imperial preceptor turned his gaze to Qin Feiyang and said, "It's been 14 years. I didn't expect that not only did you not die, you even grew to such a level." Qin Feiyang said, "The state preceptor even remembers that I left the imperial capital for 14 years. It seems that the state preceptor cares about me a lot. How could this old man not care about you when you were once known as a rare genius?" The state preceptor laughed hoarsely. "What do you mean? A monster that's hard to come by in 10,000 years. Could he be?" Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang, their eyes full of surprise. The state preceptor glanced at the crowd below and said, "As you think the person standing in front of you is the 14th prince, Qin Haoqian." "What? It's the 14th prince." His words shocked everyone in all directions, whether it was the palace maids, eunuchs, or the princes and imperial concubines. They were all shocked. Qin Feiyang was the 14th prince? Was this a dream? "My lord, please tell us that this is fake. He's not His Highness." Qin Zhong and Qin Yi were also in disbelief. The beautiful woman smiled and said, "Is it that important?" Looking at the smile on the beautiful woman's face, the two understood. Qin Feiyang was really His Highness. His Highness was back. The two looked up at Qin Feiyang and couldn't help but cry. "Impossible. 14th brother is already dead. He must be an impostor." Below, the second prince suddenly roared. Qin Feiyang looked down and sneered. "It seems that whether it's Big Brother or you all want me to die. Unfortunately, my life is cheap and God doesn't want to take it." He admitted it himself. Everyone's eyes trembled. The one who could refine the potential pill, the one who fought the emperor, the one who opened the purple gold dragon soul was the 14th prince? At this moment, their mood became complicated. They didn't know how to face this former highness. At this moment, the state preceptor looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You shouldn't have come back." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "This is my home. What's wrong with me coming back? Do I need your permission?" "You don't need to because it's your freedom. However, if you can let go of your grudges and continue to stay in the spiritual state, no one will disturb you, and you can live the rest of your life in peace and without worries." But at this point, the state preceptor couldn't help but sigh. "But what?" Qin Feiyang said, "Your Majesty, if the emperor commits a crime, he will be punished the same as the commoners. Moreover, Qin Feiyang has already been stripped of his title as a prince. He is now just a commoner who has made such a big mistake. Your Majesty, please execute him immediately as a warning to others. The state preceptor didn't answer Qin Feiyang. He turned to look at the emperor and bowed. Execute him. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. The beautiful woman, Qin Yi and Qin Zhong, also changed their expressions and looked at the emperor. However, the emperor still looked indifferent. Whoosh! The beautiful woman couldn't stand it anymore. She leaped into the sky and protected Qin Feiyang behind her, saying, "You have already killed him once. Do you want to kill him a second time? Your Majesty, His Highness has been through a lot these years. Please forgive him. Your Majesty, even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. Please." Qin Zhong and Qin Yi also flew to Qin Feiyang and knelt in the void, begging bitterly. Qin Feiyang also stared at the emperor, waiting for the emperor's reply. He didn't know what would happen next. He just wanted to see what his father's attitude would be. The emperor glanced at the beautiful woman and the other two. He then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Do you admit your crime?" "What crime have I committed?" Qin Feiyang laughed angrily. The beautiful woman hurriedly said, "Tian, don't be so stubborn, okay? Lower your head and apologize to your father." "Father? Haha, does he deserve it?" "I, Qin Feiyang, only have a mother. I have never had a father." Qin Feiyang couldn't stop laughing. The imperial advisor said, "Your Majesty, his heart has been drowned by hatred. If he is not executed now, he will definitely threaten the foundation of the great Qin Empire in the future. Your Majesty, please reconsider." Yes, he even killed his own brother. You can imagine how vicious his heart is. Your Majesty, I beg you to execute him immediately. The first prince's mother also knelt in the void, adding fuel to the fire. 14th brother has been possessed by the devil. I beg you, father, to execute him on the spot to correct the imperial court. The second prince also knelt. The other princes looked at each other and knelt down one after another. They said, "Father, please execute him." They knew that if Qin Feiyang didn't die, they wouldn't have a share of the throne. On the contrary, now that the eldest prince had been killed, if Qin Feiyang also died, then there would be no one else who could threaten them. Looking at these people, Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. This was the imperial family. Why was he born in such a place? When he was young, he felt very proud that he was born different. But now, he was extremely disgusted with all of this and the people here. He turned to look at his mother and said, "Mother, I'm tired. Come with me. Everything here has nothing to do with us in the future." "Tian, it's my fault. If I had protected you back then, you wouldn't have suffered so much." The beautiful woman touched Qin Feiyang's face. Her tears fell like rain, and her face was full of self-blame. "No, as long as I can see you, it doesn't matter how much I suffer." Qin Feiyang smiled and couldn't help but cry. "Good child, but I can't go with you." The beautiful woman shook her head. "Why? What's there to miss here?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. "There's indeed nothing to miss here, but many things are not as simple as you think. Tian, before your father gives the order, hurry up and leave." "Don't worry about me. I'm here and won't be in any danger," the beautiful woman urged. Qin Feiyang shook his head vigorously, but the beautiful woman waved her hand, opened a portal, and directly pushed Qin Feiyang in. Boom! However, at the same time, the imperial preceptor pointed his finger in the air, and an invisible force surged out. "Old bastard, don't go too far!" Qin Zhong and the other one shouted and stood in front of the portal without hesitation. But the imperial preceptor was too strong. The two didn't even have the chance to make a move and were ruthlessly killed without leaving a corpse behind. Qin Feiyang happened to turn his head and see the scene. He immediately grit his teeth in anger. The beautiful woman shouted without looking back, "Tian'er, go!" At the same time, she took a step forward, and her aura erupted like a volcano, shaking the sky. I can tolerate you hurting him the first time, but I will never tolerate you hurting him the second time. At this moment, her white clothes fluttered and her black hair danced. Her body was filled with a bone-piercing cold current, like an ice queen, sacred and inviolable. The Imperial Preceptor frowned and looked at the portal that was about to dissipate. He turned to the Emperor and said anxiously, "Your Majesty!" The Emperor closed his eyes and opened them again. Two sharp lights burst out from his eyes as he said coldly, "Execute her!" In the blink of an eye, seeing the Emperor nodding, the Imperial Preceptor's body shook, and a terrifying aura roared out. The beautiful woman was immediately imprisoned in the void. Then, his aged hand reached out in the air, and Qin Feiyang, who was about to disappear, was actually forcefully pulled out. But Qin Feiyang didn't panic, because even if he wasn't pulled out by the Imperial Preceptor, he would come back again. He couldn't let go of his mother. At this moment, his heart was filled with pain, as if it was cut by a knife. Chapter 731. For a moment, heartache, anger, and hatred occupied Qin Feiyang's entire body and mind. He couldn't figure out why he had such a father. He was so cold and heartless. What did he do wrong? Killing him once wasn't enough. Why did he have to kill him a second time? Boom! A monstrous anger roared out from Qin Feiyang's body. He stared at the Emperor like a mad beast and roared, "Why? Why?" If he was killed this time because he killed the first prince, he would accept it. But what about the first time? What was the reason? However, the Emperor's face was still emotionless and cold. "My body, hair, and skin are for my parents. If you want to kill me, I have nothing to say. But don't you want me to die knowing?" Qin Feiyang roared. "From the beginning, you shouldn't have appeared in this world." The Emperor finally spoke. But Qin Feiyang didn't understand the meaning of this sentence at all. What did he mean by he shouldn't have appeared in this world from the beginning? Since he shouldn't have appeared, why did he give birth to him and raise him in the first place? The Emperor didn't continue to explain. He turned and nodded to the Imperial tutor and didn't look at Qin Feiyang again. Looking at the familiar yet strange figure, Qin Feiyang's heart was about to explode. He closed his eyes in pain. It wasn't easy for him to return to the imperial capital, but he got such an ending. What was he doing? Why was he so stupid? He didn't know that there would be no result, but he still kept chasing. At the same time, the imperial tutor's pressure firmly imprisoned Qin Feiyang. He said, "Death is the best ending for you." After saying this, he raised his arm and pointed at Qin Feiyang. Swish! Qin Feiyang suddenly opened his eyes. Two cold lights burst out of his eyes. "You want me to die? I won't die. Sooner or later, I will make you regret it." He smiled coldly and was about to enter the ancient castle. But he was shocked to find that he couldn't enter the ancient castle. What was going on? Was it because of the imperial tutor's pressure? Whoosh! At this moment, a terrifying invisible force swept out of the imperial master's fingertip. Like an arrow, it shot towards Qin Feiyang's chest. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was in despair. Even after opening the 5th level of the Gate of Potential, he was still unable to resist the imperial tutor's pressure. Just how strong was he? "I won't let anyone hurt my child." Seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to die, the beautiful woman suddenly let out a cold shout. Her aura was like a rainbow as she forcibly broke free from the pressure of the state preceptor and stepped in front of Qin Feiyang. Puff! Immediately, that formless energy entered her chest, and a spurt of blood spurted out. "Mother!" Looking at this scene, Qin Feiyang's eyes instantly turned red. He wanted to save his mother, but he couldn't move. He wanted to take his mother with him, but he couldn't move. He had never felt so helpless before. "Tian, go quickly and never come back," the beautiful woman said without looking back. a vast aura rushed towards Qin Feiyang. The pressure was broken on the spot, and Qin Feiyang was also blasted out. "Mother, please come with me," Qin Feiyang cried. Now, the only thing he cared about was his mother. "I really can't go. Remember, you must live well. Go quickly, go quickly!" The beautiful woman shouted angrily. The imperial tutor raised his eyebrows. With a flash, he rushed towards Qin Feiyang. Swish! The beautiful woman took a step forward and stood in front of the imperial tutor again. She said anxiously, "Tian'er, go quickly. Mother is begging you, okay?" Qin Feiyang's face was filled with helplessness. He didn't want to go, because he didn't know if he could see his mother if he left. However, if he stayed, the final outcome would be death. There would be no hope. "Empress, sorry to offend you." The imperial tutor had obviously lost his patience. He was like a ghost. He landed in front of the beautiful woman like lightning and slapped the beautiful woman's lower abdomen. Puff! The beautiful woman spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face instantly turned pale. "Mother, old bastard, I'll fight it out with you." Qin Feiyang was so anxious that his eyes turned red. He took out the changshui and rushed towards the imperial tutor recklessly. So this dagger is in your hands." When the imperial tutor saw the changshui, his old face was filled with unparalleled excitement. Swish! He took a step forward and rushed towards Qin Feiyang crazily. His eyes were filled with greed. "I beg you, go quickly, Tian'er." The beautiful woman was powerless to stop him. She could only beg bitterly. However, Qin Feiyang didn't seem to hear her. He stared at the imperial tutor. His whole body was filled with bone-piercing, killing intent. At this moment, he only had the imperial tutor in his eyes. He wanted to cut this old bastard who hurt his mother into pieces. But suddenly, a mysterious force descended. Qin Feiyang only felt his body lighten. The next moment, he appeared in a familiar place. Seeing Qin Feiyang disappear without a trace, without any warning, the state preceptor was stunned. "Do you think you can escape by hiding in that ancient castle?" He smiled disdainfully. An invisible, mysterious force emerged from the top of his head and surged in all directions. "How is this possible? How can you escape the search of my divine sense?" But then, his expression changed abruptly. His old eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, in a secret room, Lu Xingqian was driving the space divine object as fast as lightning. Qin Feiyang was also a little absent-minded. Why was Lu Xingqian here? But when he came back to his senses, his expression immediately changed. He hurriedly shouted, "Go back! I can't leave my mother alone!" Lu Xingqian was silent. His face was solemn. Qin Feiyang roared, "Did you hear that? Go back quickly!" Lu Xingqian frowned and shouted, "Can you calm down? Are you still the Qin Feiyang I know?" "I can't calm down." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Even if you can't calm down, you have to calm down. Do you know how strong that imperial tutor is? Let me tell you, he has already condensed his divine sense. Do you know what divine sense is? Divine sense. Only those who have stepped into the realm of War God can have it. With his strength, not to mention you, even in the entire great Qin Empire, there might not be anyone who is his match." Lu Xingqian said in a deep voice, "War God realm." Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. War God, that is a legendary god with the ability to destroy the heavens and earth. Divine sense is all-pervasive. No matter how small something is, it can be captured, including the space divine object. If I hadn't escaped in time, I'm afraid even I would have died there," Lu Xingqian said. "But mother," Qin Feiyang was at a loss. "Don't worry. Your mother will take the initiative to stay in the imperial palace, which definitely means that the emperor will not hurt her. As for her injuries, you don't have to worry, because for a strong person like her, heart damage is not fatal. What's more, the imperial palace doesn't lack heart protection pills. Lu Xingqian said. But Qin Feiyang still wanted to say something. Can you not be so wishy-washy? Your first task now is to increase your own strength. If I really send you back now, can you defeat the imperial tutor? If you can't defeat him, how can you save your mother? Lu Xingqian said angrily. Qin Feiyang went silent. Yes, the imperial tutor is so strong, can he defeat him? Finally, he calmed down and said, I'm sorry. Understandable. After all, this kind of thing, no one can bear it. If it were me, I might be crazier and more desperate than you. Lu Xingqian sighed. Qin Feiyang clutched his aching chest and asked, Are you sure my mother will be fine? She will definitely be fine. Your mother can break free from the imperial tutor suppression. Her strength should not be underestimated. According to my speculation, her cultivation should be between 7-star and 9-star combat emperor. Lu Xingqian said. So strong? Qin Feiyang was stunned. She is not your mother. Don't you know what her cultivation is? Lu Xingqian frowned. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, I really don't know. Mother has never told me. That's true. A weak person like you can't see through the mystery of that realm. Even if she told you, it would only affect your state of mind and make you a person who is too ambitious. Lu Xingqian said. Qin Feiyang was unhappy and said, Are you very strong? As long as I am stronger than you. Lu Xingqian rolled his eyes and said, But that imperial tutor, according to my observation, shouldn't have stepped into the war god realm yet. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at him in confusion. His divine will is not very strong. He should only be half a step into the war god realm. In other words, he is the so-called false god, also known as a demigod. Lu Xingqian said. What is a false god? Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Xingqian said. A false god is an existence between a 9-star combat emperor and a war god. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization and frowned. How do you know so much? Lu Xingqian chuckled. Because I used to be a war god too. Qin Feiyang staggered and almost fell down. Let me tell you, what I said is true. Don't doubt it. Lu Xingqian said very seriously. Get lost. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and sat on the ground. He buried his head and muttered to himself. Sigh. Seeing this, Lu Xingqian sighed deeply and did not disturb Qin Feiyang. He rode the space divine object and sped out of the city. At the same time, Imperial Palace, the beautiful woman stood in the sky, her face pale. But, as Lu Xingqian expected, her life was not in danger. But the imperial tutor glanced at the surrounding void with a gloomy face. As for the emperor, there was still no expression on his face, looking unfathomable. Sooner or later, you will regret everything you have done today. The beautiful woman looked at the two coldly, and finally left these words before turning around and leaving alone. The imperial tutor suddenly had a trace of hostility between his eyebrows. He looked at the beautiful woman and said, As long as you are still here, he will definitely come back. Is that so? The beautiful woman smiled faintly without looking back, full of sarcasm. The imperial tutor clenched his hands and turned to look at the emperor. He bowed and said, Your Majesty, I think she should be thrown into the divine prison. Divine prison? The beautiful woman's body trembled. Let me think about it. The emperor said expressionlessly and took the lead to leave. The beautiful woman silently shed a tear and gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. Qin Feiyang, I will not let you go. Chapter 732. Time flew by. Half a month passed. Outside the city, on a mountain peak near the Black Dragon Pool, Qin Feiyang stood alone on the edge of the cliff, looking at the mountains below in silence. Since escaping from the imperial palace, he and Lu Xingqian had come to the Black Dragon Pool. In this half a month, he had been standing there the whole time without saying a word. As for Lu Xingqian, he had already returned to the divine palace that day, and after half a month of settling down, his mood had finally calmed down. Swish! Suddenly, a figure descended out of thin air. It was Lu Xingqian. Lu Xingqian glanced at Qin Feiyang, looked down at the mountains, and said with a smile, "How is it? Are you in a good mood?" "I'm fine." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, "How is the situation in the capital?" "This is also the purpose of my visit. The emperor has issued an arrest warrant for you. Your mother is also locked up in the divine prison, and as long as it's someone who has a good relationship with you, they're also under surveillance, including me." Lu Xingqian said. "The divine prison." Qin Feiyang clenched his fists, his eyes flashing with a fierce light. Lu Xingqian said, "Don't worry, I asked around 2 days ago. Your mother was not hurt, and the injury she suffered half a month ago has been healed." "Thank you," Qin Feiyang said. Lu Xingqian smiled faintly and asked, "You definitely can't go back to the capital. Where are you going now? If you don't have a target, I can tell you a place." "Where?" Qin Feiyang asked. "The Forgotten Land," Lu Xingqian said. How do you know about the Forgotten Land?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at him in surprise. "I told you I used to be a war god. There's nothing in the world that I don't know." Lu Xingqian smiled faintly. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, "I'm not in the mood to joke with you. Frankly speaking, I don't want to leave for the time being." "Then what do you want?" "Go to God's prison to save your mother." "Stop joking. The divine prison is at the back mountain of the imperial palace. You won't be able to sneak in." Lu Xingqian said, "I know that the god prison is in the mountain behind the imperial palace, and I also know that there are experts guarding the god prison. But I have my own plans." "Just help me take care of Ren Wushuang," Qin Feiyang said. Lu Xingqian said, "Taking care of her is a small matter. The key is you. You have to stay alive. After all, we still have to work together to accomplish something big." Qin Feiyang frowned. "What's the big deal?" "Secret." Lu Xingqian smiled mysteriously. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him and waved his hand. "Go back quickly. Don't make people suspicious. Don't worry about me. Think about my suggestion. Because the Forgotten Land is not as simple as you think." Lu Xingqian said. After that, he opened a portal and strode away. "It's not that simple?" Qin Feiyang frowned. What secret was hidden in the Forgotten Land that made Lu Xingqian so concerned? Swish! Suddenly, he flashed and entered the castle. Fatso, Wolf King, Lu Hong, the pangolin, and the black dragon snake immediately swarmed up. In the past half a month, they wanted to go out and comfort Qin Feiyang, but they couldn't leave the castle. Therefore, they could only worry here, afraid that Qin Feiyang would rush back to die on impulse. "Little Qin Zi, Lu Xingqian is right. We can't continue to stay in the capital," Wolf King said. Qin Feiyang glanced at Wolf King, looked at Fatso and the others, and asked, "Do you think so too?" They nodded. Qin Feiyang was silent for a while and nodded. "Okay, when I finish this, we will leave." "What is it?" Fatso was suspicious. "Get rid of the princes," Qin Feiyang said word by word, his eyes full of murderous intent. "What? Are you crazy?" Everyone stared at him, dumbfounded. "Since they all want me dead, I will kill them first. I want that old thing to have no descendants." Qin Feiyang sneered, full of hostility. "Okay, we don't object to this. But you tell us they are all in the palace. How can we kill them?" Lu Hong said. "Don't worry, they will come out." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and looked at Fatso. "Go to the general pavilion and ask if the potential elixir has been auctioned off. Then," he added, "if not, then they will all appear when the potential elixir is auctioned." Fatso asked, "What if it has been sold out?" Qin Feiyang said, "Then create an opportunity to force them out." Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang helplessly, nodded, and sighed. Okay, we will go crazy with you again. Lu Hong, Wolf King, and the other beasts also nodded, because they all knew that if the emperor did not pay a price, Qin Feiyang's knot in his heart would not be untied. Whoosh! Fatso left the castle, opened the portal, and went to the general pavilion in disguise. Qin Feiyang stood there, waiting for Fatso's news. In less than an hour, Fatso sent a message. Lu Hong asked, "How is it?" Fatso said, "I asked Sun Dahai just now. There are still 5 potential elixirs that have not been auctioned." Qin Feiyang said, "Did Sun Dahai recognize you?" Fatso chuckled. "Look at my current appearance. Would he be able to recognize me?" Fatso's current appearance was short, thin, and very dark. He was simply like a pig. Then, when is he going to start the auction? Qin Feiyang asked. "I've asked," he said, "that the capital city is too chaotic recently, so he doesn't plan to auction it for the time being." Fatso said, "Then we'll wait." Qin Feiyang said. Fatso said, "All right, then I'll stay in the fragrant moon in first. I'll send you a message if there's any news." Qin Feiyang nodded, turned off the image crystal, opened the 6-word formula, and continued to copy the second stroke of the kill formula. Capital City. Although half a month had passed, the matter of Qin Feiyang causing a ruckus in the imperial palace had not diminished in the slightest. All the major restaurants were discussing this matter with relish. But the most discussed thing was, where was Qin Feiyang hiding now? As the former 14th prince, he definitely wouldn't give up so easily. Time passed in a flash. Another month passed. Boom! On this day, Qin Feiyang's arm trembled, and the second stroke of the kill formula blossomed with a resplendent light. At this moment, his cultivation also soared rapidly. In just an instant, he had stepped into the 4-star war ancestor realm. Sensing the movement, the black dragon snake opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang enviously. Back then, Qin Feiyang's cultivation was not even as strong as it was. But now, it was still in the same place, while Qin Feiyang had already stepped into the 4-star war ancestor realm. Why was this person so abnormal? After pondering for a moment, it ran in front of Qin Feiyang and smiled obsequiously. "Brother Qin, can we have a chat?" "Brother Qin?" Qin Feiyang was startled. He turned to look at the black dragon snake and said speechlessly, "So mushy, there must be something wrong. Speak." "Do I have to wait until this emperor breaks through to the 9-star war ancestor realm before I can consume this potential pill and potential pill?" the black dragon snake asked. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Is there no other shortcut?" the black dragon snake said. It was only a 2-star war ancestor right now. At this rate, how long would it take to break through to the 9-star war ancestor realm? Seeing that the cultivation of Qin Feiyang and the others was advancing by leaps and bounds, it really couldn't wait any longer. What shortcut can there be? Qin Feiyang laughed. Cultivation was something that had to be done step by step. But suddenly, his expression froze. He pondered for a moment, then said, "Don't tell me I really did think of a shortcut. I just don't know if you're willing to pay the price." "Speak." The black dragon snake's spirit was aroused as it urged. Lu Hong, Wolf King, and the pangolin also opened their eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, "Cripple your cultivation and start cultivating again." "What?" The black dragon snake glared at him and said angrily, "What kind of bullshit shortcut is this? Are you trying to trick me?" "I really didn't trick you. Think about it. You are now a 2-star war ancestor. Even if I were to refine a 4-grain battle chi pill for you every day, it would probably take you several years to break through a small realm. Furthermore, the further you go, the longer it will take. Based on my preliminary calculations, you definitely won't be able to break through to the 9-star war ancestor without 180 years. However, if you cripple your cultivation and start over, I can guarantee that you will be able to recover your current cultivation in at most 10 years. You can even break through to the War Saint realm. Qin Feiyang said. Hearing you say that, it does seem to make sense. Black Dragon Snake muttered and asked, Then how many years have you been cultivating until now? You know my situation as well. If you really want to calculate, I officially started cultivating at the age of 15. It's only been 9 years now. And if you were to start over, you would definitely be faster than me, because your foundation is still there. Qin Feiyang said. The Black Dragon Snake nodded. It was indeed a little tempted. However, it had finally reached the 2-star or ancestor level with great difficulty, and it was really reluctant to cripple it just like that. Moreover, 10 years later, Qin Feiyang and the others might have already broken through to the War King, and there was still a gap between them and everyone else. Actually, it didn't want to surpass Qin Feiyang and the others. As long as it could be on par with them, it would be fine. Lu Hong, Wolf King, and the pangolin thought about it carefully and felt that Qin Feiyang's method was feasible. Little bug, don't be so ungrateful. Look at our little Hongzi. Back then, his cultivation was also crippled. Isn't he almost catching up to us now? As long as you're willing to work hard, there's nothing you can't do. Wolf King said. Lu Hong said in dissatisfaction, Can you not call me little Hongzi? It's quite awkward. I'm used to it, I can't change it. Wolf King chuckled. Black Dragon Snake glanced at Lu Hong, lowered its head, and struggled. Buzz. At this time, Qin Feiyang's image crystal rang. As soon as he took it out, the fat man's illusory figure appeared. Fatso immediately said, Boss, there's news. In 3 days, the General Pavilion will begin auctioning the potential pill. All right. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light and said, All right, in 3 days we will meet at the General Pavilion. All right, at that time, Fat Lord will be waiting for you at the entrance. Now, while there's still time, Fat Lord wants to have some fun in the fragrant Moon Inn. Fatso smiled wretchedly, and the shadow quickly dissipated. It's really hard to change one's nature. Lu Hong revealed a look of disdain. This emperor has decided it's better to have a short pain than a long pain. I'll cripple my cultivation and start over. It was also at this time. Chapter 733. Ugh. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He had only said it casually. He did not expect the Black Dragon Snake to be so persistent. Are you sure? He asked again. I'm sure. The Black Dragon Snake nodded, its eyes filled with determination. All right, wait a moment. Qin Feiyang looked at it deeply, then turned around and walked to the front of the Flood Dragon Cauldron, refining a disaster spirit pill and a marrow cleansing pill. The Black Dragon Snake took the disaster spirit pill and stuffed it into its mouth without hesitation. His cultivation immediately plummeted. Qin Feiyang also began to refine the quenching body pill and the qi gathering pill. 3 days later, he grabbed a universe bag and threw it to the Black Dragon Snake, saying, These quenching body pill and qi gathering pill are enough for you to break through to the war chief. Thank you. The Black Dragon Snake sincerely thanked him. We're all on the same side. There's no need to be so polite. Don't think about anything else in the future. Just focus on cultivating. We're all waiting for you to rise. Qin Feiyang laughed. After this period of time, he had already treated the Black Dragon Snake as his family. Similarly, the Black Dragon Snake had also completely integrated into this big family. Next, Qin Feiyang consumed a mirage form pill and turned into a thin and weak youth. He left the castle, opened the teleportation gate, and directly descended on the street in front of the main pavilion. The news that the main pavilion was going to auction the potential pill had already spread 3 days ago. Therefore, even though it was early in the morning, there was already a sea of people. Qin Feiyang stood in the middle of the crowd and scanned the crowd in front of the main pavilion. Soon, on the left side of the door, he saw a thin and short man in black, anxiously looking at the crowd. Qin Feiyong walked over in large strides and smiled. Have you reserved the room? That's right. This person was Fatso. Fatso looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously, as if he suddenly thought of something. He chuckled. Do you even need to say that? I already booked it yesterday. Then let's go. Qin Feiyong laughed. Fatso turned around and led Qin Feiyong into the general pavilion. Then they walked towards the auction house. Everywhere he passed, he heard discussions about the potential pill and Qin Feiyong. Boss, you're really a big shot now. Even a 3-year-old child knows your name. Fatso snickered. Qin Feiyong glared at him and transmitted his voice. Don't talk about these useless things. Quickly go and find out if the princes have come. There's no need to ask. They're already here, but there's a problem. As Fatso spoke, he could not help but frown. What trouble? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. They have 2 guards with them. Furthermore, they might have also realized that you would attack them. That's why they're extremely vigilant. In my opinion, it will be very difficult to find an opportunity to attack them. Fatso thought. If there's no chance, then create one. Anyway, I have to kill them today. Qin Feiyong whispered, his eyes flashing with a shocking murderous intent. Soon, the 2 entered a VIP room. The layout inside was quite simple. In the center, there was an exquisite coffee table. Next to the coffee table, there were 5 chairs neatly placed. Although it was simple, it was not low-key, because whether it was the ground or the walls, they were all inlaid with gorgeous gold and jade. And in front of them, there was a transparent floor-to-ceiling window, which could clearly see the outside scene. Qin Feiyong leaned on the chair and looked at the auction house below through the floor-to-ceiling window. It was still early before the auction, but at this moment, people were already coming and going, densely packed. Fatso looked outside and said, Boss, I'll go and find out which VIP room the princes are in. Be careful, don't reveal any flaws. Qin Feiyong warned. Don't worry about Fat Lord's work. Fatso smiled confidently and then hurried in. Qin Feiyong looked outside in silence. The room fell into a dead silence for a moment. Dong! Suddenly, a knock on the door broke the dead silence. Please come in, Qin Feiyong said. The door opened gently, and a man and a woman walked in one after another. Both of them looked to be in their 20s. The man was handsome and the woman was youthful and beautiful. They were both dressed in white, spotless, and had a good temperament. Qin Feiyong looked at the 2 unfamiliar faces and asked suspiciously, You are? I'm Li Li. This is my cousin Li Rong. The 2 of us have taken the liberty to visit you. If we have disturbed you, I hope you will forgive us. The white-clothed young man cupped his hands and smiled, displaying a refined and courteous attitude. The woman in white also bowed to Qin Feiyong. Li Rong. Qin Feiyong frowned slightly. He had no impression of this name and asked in confusion, Do I know you? This is the first time we've met. Of course, we don't know each other. Brother, may I know your name? The young man in white asked with a smile. Wang Hao. Qin Feiyong casually made up a name. Wang Hao. The young man in white thought for a while and said with a smile, King of the world, vast and righteous. Brother Wang's name is really extraordinary. Nice to meet you. Ah, Qin Feiyong was stunned. King of the world, vast and righteous? This person's imagination was too rich, wasn't it? What's the matter? He looked at the 2 of them in confusion. Since they didn't know each other, why did they come to him? Crazy? The young man in white glanced at Qin Feiyong and said with a smile, Brother Wang, are you thinking that we're crazy? Qin Feiyong was surprised. This person was so good at reading people's expressions. It seems that I guessed right. The young man in white smiled and didn't look angry. He said, I'm here to ask for a seat. A seat? Qin Feiyong was stunned and frowned. What do you mean? Look outside. There's a sea of people. There's no place to stand at all. The other VIP rooms have also been reserved. They're basically big shots in the capital. I have neither strength nor background. I really dare not look for them. So I came to try my luck here. The young man in white smiled. I can take it that you didn't reserve a seat in advance, and now you want to get one here? Qin Feiyong said. Yes. The young man in white nodded. Is that so? Qin Feiyong narrowed his eyes slightly. This reason seemed too far-fetched. The auction house was so big. There were so many places to stand. Why did he come to him? Actually, I'm quite embarrassed to disturb Brother Wang, but I really don't have a choice. Look at my cousin. She's a slender and elegant maiden. If she squeezes with those people outside, won't she be a lamb in a tiger's den? So, I hope Brother Wang can lend a helping hand and take us in. Besides, this room is quite big. The two of us won't hinder Brother Wang. The young man in white smiled. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, I'm sorry. I don't like to stay with strangers. It was clear that the brother and sister had ulterior motives. So he didn't dare to keep such a hidden danger by his side. Sigh. The young man in white sighed softly and said, Brother Qin, why don't you trust people? I really don't mean any harm. Brother Qin? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Then a fierce light burst out of his eyes. He said, What did you call me just now? Brother Qin. The young man in white looked at Qin Feiyong, but then he slapped his head hard and said in annoyance, How could I let it slip? Who exactly are you? Qin Feiyong suddenly stood up and glanced at the two coldly. Brother Qin, don't misunderstand. I swear to you that we really don't mean any harm. The young man in white hurriedly waved his hand. Qin Feiyong said in a low voice, Then how do you know my identity? He didn't tell anyone about coming to the general pavilion, but these two people not only came to find him, but also knew his identity. Could this be a coincidence? So, it must be premeditated. Facing Qin Feiyong's aggressive gaze, the young man in white smiled helplessly and nodded. Okay, I admit it. It was Lu Xingqian who told me. Him. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said, I don't think I told him that I'm coming to the general pavilion. You didn't tell him, but he guessed that you're going to deal with the princes. And to deal with the princes, the auction of the potential elixir is undoubtedly the best opportunity. The young man in white said, This person really has godlike foresight. Qin Feiyong frowned. A person you didn't know much about could see through your thoughts. It felt like you were standing naked in front of him, with no secrets to speak of. And Qin Feiyong didn't like this feeling very much. After pondering for a while, Qin Feiyong said again, Even so, how did you recognize me? One had to know. He had changed his appearance now. Even those who often stayed by his side might not be able to recognize him. The young man in white shook his head and smiled. This is my privacy. I can't tell Brother Qin. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. You and Lu Xingqian are exactly the same. You're full of mystery. You flatter me. Then, Brother Qin, can we stay here? The young man in white asked with a smile. Qin Feiyong returned to his seat and looked at the auction outside. As long as you don't hinder me, it's up to you. Thank you, Brother Qin. The young man in white cupped his hands and thanked him. Then he led Li Rong to sit on the right side of the tea table. At this time, the door was pushed open without warning. Fatso rushed in. Boss, but just as he was about to speak, he found that there were two strangers here. He walked suspiciously to Qin Feiyong's side and asked, Boss, who are they? I don't know. Qin Feiyong secretly said. Fatso wondered, Why did you let them stay here? Qin Feiyong said in a deep voice, I don't know them, but they know me. They even know the purpose of our visit to the general pavilion. What? Fatso looked at Li and Li Rong in surprise. The young man in white cupped his hands and smiled. Brother Situ, nice to meet you. Even Fat Lord recognized me. Fatso was in disbelief. Qin Feiyang sent a sound transmission. Don't worry about them. How's the investigation? I found out. They're in VIP rooms 1 and 12. Fatso said. How many came in total? Qin Feiyang asked. 12. They're all familiar to you. Second prince to 15th prince. Fatso said. Good. Chapter 734. Seeing Qin Feiyang and Fatso exchanging glances, Lili also knew that the two must be secretly talking about something, but he didn't ask or say anything. About half an hour passed. Dong! A loud and clear chime of a bell echoed in the auction hall. The scene fell into a dead silence. Everyone was looking at the auction stage in the center. After a while, an old man in white came into everyone's sight. It was Sun Dahai. Sun Dahai stood in the middle of the stage and chuckled. I believe everyone is impatient from waiting. Yes, don't talk nonsense, let's start. The crowd roared with laughter. Sun Dahai said, I don't want to talk nonsense, but there are some things that I have to say. Everyone held their breath and waited for him to continue. Sun Dahai said, everyone knows that the potential pill came from Qin Feiyang. Everyone nodded. This was something that was known to all. If Qin Feiyang is still here, our general pavilion will definitely not run out of stock, because no matter what price we have to pay, we will buy it from Qin Feiyang. But it's different now. Qin Feiyang is wanted and his whereabouts are unknown. No one can supply us with a potential pill. Because of this, the value of the potential pill now is undoubtedly greater than before. I might as well tell everyone the truth. Our treasure pavilion only has 5 potential pills in our hands now. It can be said that every pill used is one less pill. Sun Dahai sighed. The people present also sighed for a while. Yes, Qin Feiyang is no longer here, and the potential pill is going to be peerless. The remaining 5 potential pills are really more precious than peerless treasures. Fatso frowned and said discontentedly, auction it. What's the point of talking so much nonsense? People who do business will definitely use some emotional means in advance to raise the value of the auction items. Lili laughed. Did Fat Lord talk to you? Why are you talking so much? Besides, how can Fat Lord not understand such a simple principle? Fatso looked at Lili coldly. Lili was stunned. He smiled helplessly and said, all right, it's my fault. I'll shut up. You better shut up. Fatso harumphed coldly and transmitted his voice. Boss, why don't we continue to cooperate with the General Pavilion in secret? No. The person behind the General Pavilion is also the Emperor. If the potential pill continues to be auctioned, it will definitely arouse suspicion. Qin Feiyang said. Most importantly, he was not short of money now, so there was no need to take this risk. Sun Dahai continued to say a series of emotional words. In the end, the people in the auction house were full of fighting spirit and looked determined to win. Seeing such an effect, Sun Dahai was very satisfied. He smiled and said, all right, I've said what needs to be said. Next, let's start the auction. After saying that, he took out a jade box and opened it. As soon as the lid of the box was opened, a strong medicinal fragrance immediately filled the air of the auction house. Everyone's eyes immediately lit up. Sun Dahai's face became serious. He said, same old rules, bid freely, no cap. Begin. 250 billion. Before he finished speaking, an arrogant voice sounded from one of the VIP rooms. What? 250 billion right off the bat? As soon as this was said, the auction house was in an uproar. One had to know. Those potential pills that were auctioned in the past were the highest price. With such a high price, how are the others going to bid? Not everyone is qualified to bid for a treasure like the potential pill. That arrogant voice sounded again. It's the second prince's voice? Fatso frowned. Yes, it's him. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li smiled and said, Today's auction will definitely be more intense than before. It can even be said to be an invisible battle. Qin Feiyang nodded. Now that the eldest prince was dead, the position of the crown prince was empty. In order to compete for the position of the crown prince, the princes would think of ways to make themselves more outstanding. The more effective, direct, and faster way was undoubtedly the potential pill. As long as one got the potential pill and opened the door of potential, one's talent would change drastically. At that time, the chances of succeeding the position of the crown prince would of course be greater. In addition, there were only 5 potential pills in the treasure pavilion, so the princes would naturally fight for them. Second brother is right. Before bidding for the potential pill, we have to consider whether we have the ability or not. I bid 250 billion. At this moment, another arrogant voice sounded. Moreover, there was a hint of threat in his words. This was a threat to everyone except the princes. Third prince. Everyone was stunned. Those who had the ability to participate in the auction could be said to be either rich or noble. Which one of these people wasn't a shrewd old fox? They naturally understood the hidden meaning of the third prince's words. Therefore, no one dared to bid. No one dared to offend these princes. Third brother, how much wealth do you have? I know better than anyone. Why bother to compete? 250 billion. As soon as the third prince's voice fell, the second prince opened his mouth to mock. That's not necessarily true. 253 billion. The third prince continued to bid, unwilling to admit defeat. Then let's join in. 254 billion. 255 billion. The other princes also began to scramble to bid. For a time, the auction house became the exclusive battlefield of the princes. It was extremely intense. As for the others, they all became idlers who joined in the fun. Looking at this scene, Fatso sneered. Back in the imperial palace, none of these people didn't want Qin Feiyang to die. But now, they were all here madly bidding for the pills refined by Qin Feiyang. Didn't they find it ridiculous? Suddenly, Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Boss, Fat Lord has a question." "What?" Qin Feiyang asked. Fatso said, "Since the owner of the treasure pavilion is also the emperor, why doesn't the emperor directly give them the potential pill?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled and said, "If we do this, it will involve a lot of conflicts. First, who should we give the potential pill to? If we give it to the second prince, the other princes will definitely be dissatisfied. If we give it to another prince, the second prince will also feel uncomfortable. At that time, he will definitely say that the emperor is biased toward someone. Secondly, the son of the emperor is different from the children of ordinary families. For the children of ordinary families, their parents will do everything they can to give them everything they want. But the son of the emperor has to learn to fend for himself from a young age, because they are destined to be different from the moment they were born. If a son of the emperor doesn't have the ability, he will be abandoned sooner or later and fend for himself. Therefore, in some aspects, the emperor won't care and let them fight for it with their own ability. Qin Feiyang explained, "In the past, I was quite envious of them. They were born high and mighty and didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But after hearing what you said, I think it's better to forget about it. It's so hard to live. It's better to live an ordinary life." Fatso shook his head. "I don't agree with this. The poor have their troubles. The rich have their troubles. The only difference is that different people have different problems. Actually, in the end, it's the same. There's not much difference." Lili said. Fatso immediately frowned and said angrily, "Didn't I tell you to shut up?" Fine, I'll shut up. Li was a little helpless. Qin Feiyang glanced at Li and continued to look at the auction house. He transmitted his voice. What he said makes sense. Bullshit. Fatso coldly snorted. He just didn't like this person. Qin Feiyang didn't discuss this issue anymore and said to himself, "How many gold coins do we have?" "More than 300 billion. What's wrong?" Fatso asked. "Nothing." Qin Feiyong responded and didn't say anything else. His eyes flickered. Soon, the various princes raised the price of the potential pill to 260 billion. This price had far exceeded the previous auction prices. But Sun Dahai was very dissatisfied. What he wanted was to double the price of the potential pill. But after the princes made such a fuss, the others didn't dare to bid. According to this situation, it was estimated that at most it would be 300 billion in the end. "I have to think of a way," he pondered in his heart. 270 billion. But at this moment, a calm voice sounded. Everyone immediately raised their heads and looked at the VIP room where the voice came from. This voice sounds familiar. I also feel like I've heard it somewhere before. Everyone was suspicious. This seems to be Zhuge Mingyang's voice. He also intends to interfere. At the same time, Fatso frowned slightly. He increased the price by 10 billion in one go. He doesn't intend to interfere, but is determined to win. And I'm sure that the princes won't compete with Zhuge Mingyang. Qin Feiyong said. Zhuge Mingyang had already opened the second level of the gate of potential with his own ability. If he could get another potential pill, he would be able to open the third level. His talent would undoubtedly be more terrifying. At the same time, it also showed that Zhuge Mingyang didn't have much confidence in opening the third level of the gate of potential. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to auction the potential pill. Similarly, it was also not beyond Qin Feiyong's expectation. When Zhuge Mingyang opened his mouth, the princes didn't say anything for a long time. Fatso said in surprise, "They really don't want to compete." "If it were me, I wouldn't compete either," Qin Feiyong said. Whether it was talent or intelligence, this person was a monstrous existence. In the past, he followed the eldest prince, and the other princes couldn't do anything about it. But now that the eldest prince was dead, these princes would definitely think of ways to win him over. So, they would rather not have this potential pill than offend Zhuge Mingyang. "Is there anyone else who wants to bid?" Seeing that the auction house was silent, Sun Dahai frowned and asked loudly. He was a little troubled. He thought that Zhuge Mingyang's bid would change the situation, but he didn't expect that the princes would directly give up the bid. Of course, he also understood the reason behind this. It was just that he really couldn't accept the price. But after waiting for a long time, no one said anything. Sigh. Sun Dahai couldn't help but sigh. Today was really a bad start. Since no one else wants to bid, then I'll announce the result. The final winner of the potential pill is Zhuge, Sun Dahai announced in a loud voice. But at this moment, a voice that seemed to be too weak to even stand up to the wind rang out. 280 billion. When this voice sounded, a trace of surprise crept onto everyone's face. Chapter 735. At the same time, in a certain VIP room, Zhuge Mingyang could not help but frown. As Qin Feiyong expected, he was determined to get this potential pill. He also had full confidence that as long as he opened his mouth, no one would dare to fight with him. However, he had never expected that someone would suddenly appear out of nowhere. 281 billion. Zhuge Mingyang hesitated for a moment and slowly opened his mouth. The highest bidder wins. This was the rule of the treasure pavilion. Even if he was once the #1 genius of the imperial capital, he could not violate this rule. 285 billion. That weak and powerless voice rang out again, and he increased the price by 9 billion in one go. It seemed that he was determined to get it. At this moment, everyone looked at the VIP room where the voice came from. The transparent floor-to-ceiling window could clearly see the scene outside, but the people outside could not see the scene inside. Everyone was guessing who was this person. Why did he have the intention to target Zhuge Mingyang? At the same time, Fatso, Li Li, and Li Rong also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Because the person who bid was Qin Feiyang, they could not understand. Qin Feiyang did not lack the potential pill at all. And this potential pill originally came from Qin Feiyang. Why was he competing with Zhuge Mingyang now? Was there any meaning? But Qin Feiyang did not explain. Looking at the VIP room where Zhuge Mingyang was, his eyes flashed. 285, 1 billion. There was a moment of silence. Zhuge Mingyang's voice rang out again. 300 billion. Qin Feiyang said without hesitation. 300 billion. Hearing this number, the people in the auction house were shocked. 300 billion gold coins, for most people, was already an astronomical figure. But this person did not hesitate before bidding. Could it be that he was another disciple of a Marshal Marquis? But even if he was a disciple of a Marshal Marquis, he might not be able to afford this astronomical price. But Sun Dahai was very excited. No matter who the bidder was, as long as he could make money, it was fine. He had a feeling that the price would continue to skyrocket. But at this moment, Zhuge Mingyang's voice rang out. I give up. Give up? Sun Dahai was stunned. His current mood could be said to be extremely puzzled. He had thought that Zhuge Mingyang would fight to the end. Who would have thought that he would give up so easily? But that was fine. At least it was higher than the previous price. He coughed dryly and asked loudly, 300 billion, anyone else? 301 million. The voice of the second prince rang out again. Previously, he didn't fight for it because he was giving face to Zhuge Mingyang. Now that Zhuge Mingyang had given up, he naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. 310 billion. However, Qin Feiyang didn't even think about it and continued to bid. Still bidding. Looks like he's not targeting Zhuge Mingyang. Everyone mumbled. In the meantime, the second prince frowned and said in a deep voice, Your Excellency, just take it as giving this prince face and giving me this potential pill. 310, 1 billion. From his tone, one could tell that the price had already exceeded his limit. However, Qin Feiyang remained unmoved and said, 320 billion. Another bid of 10 billion. Pa. Immediately, in the second prince's VIP room, the sound of a table being slammed could be heard. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. Similarly, he didn't bid anymore, because he could no longer afford this price. Sun Dahai suppressed his excitement and asked, 320 billion. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? Although this price didn't double as he had expected, compared to the previous auction price, it was 100 billion higher. He was satisfied. In the end, no one raised the price again. After all, even the princes couldn't afford this price, let alone others. After Sun Dahai announced the result, Qin Feiyang let Fatso pay. Very soon, Fatso brought the potential pill back to the VIP room and complained. Spending so much money to buy a useless potential pill. Fat Lord doesn't even know what you're thinking. After saying that, he threw the potential pill to Qin Feiyang like trash. Qin Feiyang caught it in his hand and smiled meaningfully. Who said it's useless? What do you mean? Fatso was surprised. Li Li and Li Rong also looked at him curiously. Qin Feiyang didn't explain and said to Fatso, Go and invite the princes here. Tell them that I want to give them a big gift. You want to give them the potential pill? Li Rong was surprised. A bright light flashed in Li Li's eyes as he smiled and said, Little sister, you don't understand. Brother Qin has an ulterior motive. The potential pill is just a bait to lure the various princes over. Bait? Fatso looked at Li Li, then looked at Qin Feiyang, as if he suddenly thought of something, and a sinister smile appeared in his eyes. Boss, you're really sinister. All right, just you wait. Fat Lord will go and invite them. Fatso chuckled and hurriedly ran out. The auction outside was still going on. Qin Feiyang looked at Sun Dahai on the auction stage and muttered to himself, This time, you've gotten a huge bargain. If it wasn't for dealing with the princes, he wouldn't have bid for the potential pill, and the price of the potential pill wouldn't have soared to more than 300 billion. However, as long as the plan succeeded, it was worth it to lose these gold coins. Dong! Soon, a knock on the door sounded. "You're here?" Qin Feiyang muttered, sorted out his mood, and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open, and a black-armored guard took the lead and walked into the VIP room. Behind the guard, there was a young man in a python robe. He was about 20 years old and had an imposing appearance. And behind the young man in the python robe, there was also a black-armored guard. After the three of them entered the room, the guard in front retreated to the side. The young man in the python robe sized up Qin Feiyang and the Li siblings and said, "May I ask, which one of you is looking for this prince?" "Me." Qin Feiyang stood up and said. The young man in the python robe asked, "Who are you? Is there something you need from this prince?" "Your Highness, please wait for a moment. Please take a seat." Qin Feiyang pointed to the seat next to him and said with a faint smile. The young man in the python robe frowned. "This prince doesn't have time to waste with you. If you have something to say, say it quickly. Do you really think you're something?" Qin Feiyang secretly sneered and said indifferently, "Since your Highness doesn't have time, then please go back, but this potential pill—" At this point, he returned to his seat and lowered his head to play with the potential pill in his hand. Seeing the potential pill, the young man in the python robe's eyes suddenly lit up, and then he smiled and sat opposite Qin Feiyang. The two guards also stood behind him, looking at Qin Feiyang and the other two warily. The young man in the python robe cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I'm the 15th prince. May I know your name?" "So this is my 15th brother." Qin Feiyang muttered and smiled. "Your Highness, please don't be impatient. When the guests are all here, I will naturally introduce myself." "There's someone else?" The 15th prince frowned. "Dong!" Before he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. "Please come in," Qin Feiyang said. The door opened, and another young man in a python robe and two black-armored guards strode into the room. It was the 9th prince. 9th brother? 15th brother? Seeing that the 15th prince was also here, the 9th prince was immediately stunned. Seeing that the 9th prince was also here, the 15th prince was also stunned. "Please take a seat." Qin Feiyang stood up and pointed at the empty seat next to the 15th prince, smiling at the 9th prince. "What's going on?" The 9th prince was confused. After a while, the other princes also arrived one after another. Only the 2nd prince was not there yet. The 3rd prince looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and said, "Why did you call all of us here?" "Your Highness, don't worry," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Creak! At this moment, the door opened again. Fatso walked in with the 2nd prince and his two guards. "Second brother is also here?" All the princes frowned. "Why are you all here?" The 2nd prince could not help but raise his eyebrows. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. He then turned to the princes and said with a smile, "There are limited seats, so I can't let everyone sit. Please forgive me." The 4th prince said impatiently, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. Don't waste our time. Then I'll introduce myself first. I'm Wang Hao from the Black Dragon City. I'm a 4-star battle grandmaster." Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The Black Dragon City was also located in the imperial capital. It was a medium-sized city, but it was very far from the capital. Qin Feiyang had only heard of it, but had never been there. The 2nd prince asked curiously, "Since Brother Wang is from the Black Dragon City, why did you come to our capital?" Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and sighed. "It's a bit difficult to talk about this." The 2nd prince said, "If it's difficult to talk about, then don't talk about it. Just tell us your purpose." "Well," Qin Feiyang hesitated, glanced at the black-armored guards and said, "Can you ask them to leave for a while?" With these guards there, he could not do anything at all. But hearing his pleading, all the princes frowned for a moment. Qin Feiyang said, "Everyone, what I'm going to say next is very important. Even if it's your confidants, you'd better not let them know." So mysterious? The princes were stunned. The second prince waved to the two guards behind him and said, "You guys go out first." "Your Highness, you can't." "Yeah, this person's background is unknown. We have to be careful." The two guards hurriedly sent sound transmissions. "It's fine." The second prince waved his hand. This was the capital, and it was also the main pavilion of the treasure pavilion. Who would dare to cause trouble here? Moreover, they were all princes who would dare to harm them. One of the guards secretly said, "Then we'll guard outside the door. If there's anything, call us." The second prince nodded. Then the two guards glanced at Qin Feiyang, then turned around and walked out. The second prince's guards left, and the other princes also let their guards go out. Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso and said, "Go close the door." "All right." Fatso shouted, turned around and ran to the door, stuck his head out to look at both sides of the door, and then closed it. Then he walked to Qin Feiyang's side and quietly sent a sound transmission. "They're all guarding the door. What should we do?" "Kill them all." Qin Feiyang thought, "Are you crazy? They're right outside. If there's any movement, they'll hear it. At that time, even if we can kill the princes, we won't be able to escape." Chapter 736. Then what do you think we should do? We lost more than 300 billion to invite them here. We can't just let it go like this, right? Qin Feiyang said. Fatso said, "But this is too risky. They are the sons of the emperor. How can there be no risk in killing them? Act according to the situation later. As long as I make a move, you immediately open a portal." Qin Feiyang secretly instructed. "All right," Fatso replied. Now that the arrow was on the bow, it had to be released. The second prince urged, "Hurry up and say it." Qin Feiyang raised his arm and released his fingers. The potential pill immediately appeared in front of the princes. Immediately, everyone's eyes lit up, full of desire. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Actually, I didn't snatch the potential pill for myself, but to give it to your Highness." "For us?" The princes looked at each other. "That's right. This is my first time in the capital, and I'm unfamiliar with the place, so I would like to ask your Highness to take care of me in the future." Qin Feiyang said. The princes suddenly realized that he was trying to curry favor with them. The second prince said playfully, "We have seen your sincerity, but how are we going to split this potential pill?" Qin Feiyang said, "Then, according to your Highness, how should we split this potential pill?" The second prince smiled and said, "That will depend on your choice." In other words, Qin Feiyang could only choose one person. "Hearing your Highness' words, it seems that I really have to think about it." Qin Feiyang furrowed his brows as he sized up the princes. The princes also looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. After all, this was a big bargain. Who didn't want it? In the end, Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, "After thinking about it, I still feel that it's more appropriate to choose your Highness, the second prince." The second prince smiled. However, the faces of the other princes darkened. Qin Feiyang said, "Everyone, don't be anxious. Although I don't have the potential pill, I have prepared a greeting gift for everyone." The 15th prince snorted coldly and said, "What kind of meeting gift can compare to the potential pill?" "Your Highness is right. It is indeed incomparable to the potential pill, but it is still a rare treasure. I guarantee that you will be satisfied." Qin Feiyang smiled and walked up to the second prince, offering the potential pill with both hands. The second prince chuckled as he grabbed the potential elixir. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang abruptly raised his head. and two sharp beams of light shot out from his eyes. Following closely, a red sword aura shot out from his fingertip and entered the second prince's glabella. Ah! A painful scream suddenly exploded in the auction house. What's the situation? Everyone was bewildered. Sun Dahai, who was in the auction house, immediately stopped the auction and looked at Qin Feiyang's VIP room in surprise. In the meantime, inside the VIP room, the third prince and the others were also glaring at the second prince, who had fallen to the ground in disbelief. Fatso also opened a portal. In the blink of an eye, after killing the second prince, Qin Feiyang grabbed the potential elixir and looked at the third prince and the others, murderous intent overflowing from his eyes. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, more than a dozen sword auras appeared and entered the glabella of the princes. Immediately, blood splattered across the sky. The screams shocked everyone. Qin Feiyang sneered and said, "This is my gift to all of you. Are you satisfied?" Bang! Before he finished speaking, the door was forced open. The black-armored guards guarding outside swarmed into the VIP room. When they saw the situation of the princes, their expressions changed drastically. Fatso shouted, "Boss, let's go!" Qin Feiyang glanced at those black-armored guards, then took a step forward and directly entered the teleportation gate. Li Li and Li Rong also hurriedly got up and rushed into the portal. One of the guards suddenly came back to his senses and shouted, "Stop them!" Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth and said with a cold smile, "Go back and tell the emperor and the state preceptor that I, Qin Feiyang, will be back sooner or later." This sentence resounded throughout the auction house, with strong hatred and murderous intent. What? There was no suspense. The auction house was in an uproar. "You are the 14th prince." The guards also looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. "Other than me, who else could it be?" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly, and his figure disappeared without a trace. Crack! Just as Qin Feiyang left, the floor-to-ceiling window shattered. Two figures rushed in like lightning and landed in the VIP room. It was Sun Dahai and Zhuge Mingyang. Looking at the princes lying in a pool of blood, their faces were filled with horror. At the same time, the people outside also flew into the air and looked at the princes' corpses in horror. Qin Feiyang actually appeared again, and he even killed all the princes. Wasn't this person too crazy? Where is he? After Zhuge Mingyang came back to his senses, he looked at the guards with a gloomy look. He escaped. One of the guards said, "Zhuge Mingyang said angrily he killed so many princes, and you actually let him escape. Do you know what the consequences are?" The guards wanted to say something, but stopped. Their faces were full of horror. Although this matter was not their fault, it was their fault for not protecting their master well. If the emperor pursued this matter, none of them would be able to live. So many of you can't even stop one Qin Feiyang. You are all good-for-nothings and useless. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and inform the commander. Zhuge Mingyang clenched his fists and shouted angrily, "Yes, yes, yes." One of the guards quickly took out a video crystal and sent a message to the commander of the invincible Black Army. Zhuge Mingyang turned to Sun Dahai and said gloomily, "This matter happened in your Zhen Bao Pavilion. I'm afraid your Zhen Bao Pavilion can't escape the blame." Sun Dahai frowned. It seemed that he was dissatisfied with Zhuge Mingyang, but he didn't refute, because it was the truth. Although he didn't know that Qin Feiyang had sneaked into Zhen Bao Pavilion, it was an undeniable fact that all the princes had died here. If the emperor didn't pursue this matter, it would be fine. If the emperor pursued this matter, he might not be able to keep his life. Alas, this bastard really knows how to harm people. What did you say? Qin Feiyang killed the second prince, and the others again? Oh my God, this person is too scary. He is still wanted. How can he come out to kill people again? Isn't he afraid of being caught? Crazy, really crazy. This matter spread from 1 to 10, from 10 to 100, and soon it became a hot topic in the capital city. No matter who heard this news, they were all shocked and frightened. It was already shocking enough that he had killed the first prince, caused havoc in the imperial palace, and challenged the emperor. Now he had killed all the 12 princes again. This Qin Feiyang was really a person that couldn't be offended. Meanwhile, in the imperial palace, after the commander of the invincible Black Army received the news, he went to see the emperor immediately. However, the emperor didn't have much of a reaction. On the other hand, the state preceptor was so angry that he stomped his feet in the throne room. He looked at the emperor and bowed. "Your Majesty, this Qin Feiyang is too arrogant. We must find a way to punish him as soon as possible. Otherwise, we don't know what will happen next." The Grand Commander nodded and said, "The state preceptor is right. First it was His Highness the Crown Prince, and now it's Second Highness and the others. If this continues, I'm afraid that even the princesses and the princes who are still underage will be killed by him." The state preceptor said, "That's what I'm worried about. Commander, do you have any good ideas?" "According to my investigation, although Qin Feiyang is cold and ruthless to outsiders, he is still very loyal to his friends. Why don't we use his friends as bait and force him to come out?" The commander thought for a moment and said. The state preceptor's eyes lit up and asked, "Who are his friends?" "As far as I know, Lu Xingqian, Ren Wuxuang, Dong Zhenyang, Shen Mei, Ling Yu, Zhao Yu, Feng Ranran, and Luo Dan have the best relationship with him. There is also a person called Tan Wu. I heard that Qin Feiyang likes him very much and has always wanted to take him under his command." The commander said, "Okay, immediately take people to catch all of them for me." The state preceptor said. But at this moment the emperor, who had been silent, said, "I don't agree." The state preceptor and the commander both looked at the emperor. "To deal with a war master, we still have to use his friends to threaten him. If word gets out, where will the face of the royal family go?" The emperor said expressionlessly. The state preceptor said, "Your Majesty, the situation is different now. If there is another way, I will not do this. Since you know it's a bad idea, then you shouldn't do it. In short, I won't agree. You are not allowed to secretly attack them behind my back." The emperor said. The state preceptor's eyes flashed, and he bowed and said, "Then, Your Majesty, please indicate how we should catch Qin Feiyang. This is your business. Think about it yourself." After saying that, the emperor got up and disappeared in an instant. "I guess that Your Majesty still has a trace of feelings for Qin Feiyang." The state preceptor's eyes darkened. "You can't blame Your Majesty for this. After all, no matter what, Qin Feiyang is also Your Majesty's flesh and blood. He was once the son he was most proud of and cared about the most." The commander sighed. "That little bastard has become like this. What else is there to care about? You go and arrest Lu Xingqian and the others." The state preceptor ordered. The commander was stunned and hurriedly said, "State preceptor, Your Majesty has clearly said that we can't attack them. Just do it. If Your Majesty pursues responsibility, I will bear it alone." The state preceptor said, "This is not a matter of bearing responsibility. This is a crime of disobedience." The commander said. The state preceptor's eyes were cold, and he said, "If you don't go, I will let the law enforcers of the temple do it." "Law enforcers." The commander's body trembled, and he nodded and said, "Okay, we will do as the state preceptor said, but I have a small condition." "Say it." The state preceptor said, "You can arrest them, but don't hurt them. After all, they only have a good relationship with Qin Feiyang. There is nothing else." The commander said, "Do I need you to say that? If Qin Feiyang really does not save them, I will definitely let them go." The state preceptor said, "Well, I will do it right away." The commander breathed a sigh of relief, turned around, and strode out. "Qin Feiyang, you'll never be able to escape from this old man's grasp. That dagger, I am determined to get it. Chapter 737. Divine Palace. A golden figure appeared out of thin air. It was the great commander. Following closely, black-armored guards appeared above the Pill Hall and Martial Arts Hall. There were 20 of them, and the aura they emitted was unfathomable. "Go down!" The great commander shouted coldly. His voice was as loud as a bell. Whoosh! Immediately, those black-armored guards rushed into the Pill Hall and Martial Arts Hall like lightning. What's going on? Why are there so many invincible black army? Looking at the black-armored guards that looked like divine soldiers descending from the heavens, the disciples of the Temple of Light were bewildered. After a while, Lu Xingqian, Ren Wushuang, Shen Mei, Tan Wu, Dong Jingyang Lingyu, and the others were brought to the great commander. They, too, were baffled by this. However, Lu Xingqian could vaguely guess. He looked at the great commander, cupped his hands, and asked, "Sir, did we do anything wrong?" "No." The great commander shook his head. Lu Xingqian said, "Sir, since we didn't do anything wrong, why did you bring us here?" Ren Wushuang and the others were also confused. "Follow me to a place first." The great commander waved his hand and a portal opened. Dong Jingyang transmitted his voice. "Look at him. He doesn't seem to be friendly." Lu Xingqian's eyes flashed. He said to himself, "Don't be rash. Let's observe the situation first. Let's go." After speaking, he took the lead and stepped into the portal. Dong Jingyang and the others looked at each other and walked in one after another. Immediately, the Grand Commander also led the 20 guards into the teleportation gate. Soon, everyone appeared in an unfamiliar place. Below them was a vast mountain range. They couldn't see the end of it. The mountain range was high and low, and the peaks were stacked on top of each other. The mountain stream was filled with towering trees, and the thick vines were entangled like dragons. At the same time, everyone could still feel a terrifying aura from the mountain stream. "Where is this?" Lu Xingqian and the others were confused. Suddenly, Dong Jingyang pointed to a place in front and said in surprise, "Look, there's an ancient castle." Everyone looked over. There was a giant mountain that was several thousand feet tall standing in the middle of the mountain. On top of the mountain, there was an ancient castle. The castle was huge and towered into the clouds. It was completely black like ink and emitted a mysterious and cold aura. And on the front of the castle, there were 2 big words carved in blood. "God's prison." Looking at these 2 words, Lu Xingqian's gaze trembled. He couldn't help but feel an uneasy premonition. Immediately, he then sent a voice transmission to Dong Jingyang and the others, exhorting them, "Everyone, you must be careful because this is the back mountain of the Imperial Palace. Qin Feiyang's mother is now imprisoned in this divine prison." "What?" The group of people was shocked. Why did the commander of the invincible black army bring them to the divine prison? "You don't have to be nervous. I brought you here because I want you to do something for me. As long as you do as I say obediently, I will let you go immediately," the Grand Commander said. "One thing? Is it because of Qin Feiyang?" Lu Xingqian furrowed his brows slightly, but did not ask directly. "Because sometimes you can't be too smart." He looked at the Grand Commander suspiciously and asked, "What is it?" "I believe you already know that Qin Feiyang killed the second prince and the others," the Grand Commander said. "Yes." Lu Xingqian and the others nodded. Although this matter had just happened, it caused a huge commotion, so it was immediately spread in the divine palace. "To tell you the truth, His Majesty is very angry now. The Imperial Preceptor even gave the order for me to capture you all and use you all to threaten Qin Feiyang," the Grand Commander said. Lu Xingqian frowned and said, "So you brought us here?" "That's right, but I also know that this matter has nothing to do with you." "So, As long as you are willing to cooperate with me and persuade Qin Feiyang to come back and surrender, nothing will happen. On the contrary, if you are not willing to cooperate, then I will have to throw you into the divine prison to lure Qin Feiyang here. The Grand Commander was very straightforward and could be considered an open and above-board person. But hearing this, Ren Wuxuang and the others obviously showed a trace of dissatisfaction. Calm down. Lu Xingqian saw this and secretly comforted them. Then, he looked at the Grand Commander and sighed. Lord Commander, our relationship with Qin Feiyang is indeed not bad. However, it hasn't reached the point where we will live and die together. I don't think he will listen to our advice. The Grand Commander's eyes were slightly cold. How do you know if you haven't tried? Well, I'll try. Lu Xingqian sighed helplessly, took out the image crystal, and poured his battle qi into it. At the same time, his eyes flashed slightly, and he carefully asked, May I ask, does the Emperor know about this matter? The Grand Commander's face suddenly darkened, and he shouted, This is not something you should ask. Lu Xingqian's face changed, and he hurriedly lowered his head and said, Sorry, I said too much. Please forgive me. But an imperceptible light flashed across his eyes. At the same time, on the mountain peak near the Black Dragon Pool, Qin Feiyang and Fatso had already taken the facial restoration pill and restored their true appearance. Li asked with a smile, Brother Qin, what are your plans now? Fatso raised his eyebrows and said, What plans do we have? Does it have anything to do with you? Not necessarily. Li chuckled. Fatso was taken aback and frowned. What do you mean? Li smiled but did not say anything. Qin Feiyang also turned around, looked at Li and Li Rong and said, Tell me, who are you? Li was about to speak. At this moment, Qin Feiyang's image crystal rang. He took out the image crystal and merged a wisp of battle qi into it. Immediately, Lu Xingqian and the others appeared, including the Grand Commander of the invincible Black Army. Seeing that Lu Xingqian and the others were with the Grand Commander, Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. Lu Xingqian asked, Brother Qin, where are you now? As he spoke, he winked at Qin Feiyang. After being together for so long, Qin Feiyang knew Lu Xingqian very well. He immediately understood and said indifferently, Where I am has something to do with you. Indeed, it has nothing to do with you. But because of you, we were all captured by the Grand Commander. If you don't come back and turn yourself in, I'm afraid we'll be in big trouble. Brother Qin, in any case, we're friends. You can't implicate us. Lu Xingqian said, Friends? I can't afford to be friends with you. Qin Feiyang sneered, then looked at the Grand Commander and mocked. You want to capture a few cats and dogs to threaten me? Qin Feiyang, aren't you looking down on me too much? Is that so? A cold light flashed in the Grand Commander's eyes. His index finger shot out, and a wisp of battle qi entered Lu Xingqian's chest like lightning. Lu Xingqian's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. And there was a bloody hole the size of a thumb in his chest. But it didn't hurt his heart. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang's hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, couldn't help but clench tightly. But his expression didn't change at all. Obviously, he was cold and ruthless. You really don't care? The Grand Commander raised his eyebrows and looked at Ren Wuxuang and the others. If you don't come back, I will kill them all. After saying that, with a wave of his hand, several wisps of battle qi emerged and entered the chests of Ren Wuxuang and the others. Suddenly, blood dyed the sky. Bastard! Fatso also clenched his fists tightly, and a strong killing intent emerged in his heart. Qin Feiyang secretly said, Don't be impulsive, he's just testing us. Fatso said, Fat Lord knows that he's testing us, but we can't let him off. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a shocking light. He looked at the Grand Commander and said indifferently, I don't have time to waste with you. If you want to kill them, go ahead. After saying that, he directly turned off the image crystal, and his face immediately became gloomy. Boss, why don't we sneak into the Imperial Palace again and have a good time? Fatso's face was incomparably gloomy. Heard of it? Li Li frowned slightly and said hesitantly, Can I say a few words? Speak. Fatso shouted without worry. I believe that Lu Xingqian has already told you about the strength of the Imperial Preceptor. Your Space Divine item can't escape the search of his divine sense. If you sneak into the Imperial Palace now, to put it bluntly, you're digging your own grave. Lili said. Fatso said angrily, but we can't let them hurt Ren Wuxuang and the others. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, It doesn't matter. Even if they have this idea, I'm afraid they can't do it. What do you mean? Fatso was suspicious. Do you think that Lu Xingqian is a person who will sit still and wait for death? If the Grand Commander really wants to kill them, he can enter the Space Divine item and take everyone away from the Imperial Palace. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Fatso was stunned and suddenly said, That's right. His Space Divine item can move. In other words, as long as Lu Xingqian was there, they didn't need to worry at all. Whoosh! At this moment, a black figure appeared in the sky above the Black Dragon Swamp. This person had a dignified appearance. His 7-foot body was tall and straight, like an iron pine. He held a folding fan in his hand and looked very elegant. Qin Feiyang immediately sensed this person's aura. When he looked up, his pupils suddenly shrank, because this person was Zhuge Mingyang. How did he know we were here? After Fatso finished speaking, he looked at Li Li and Li Rong unkindly. Li Li hurriedly waved his hand and said, Don't mess around. We didn't leak any information. Zhuge Mingyang looked around and immediately saw Qin Feiyang and the others. You're really here. He closed his folding fan and took a step forward. In an instant, he landed on the peak of the mountain, and his aura firmly locked onto Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, You can even guess that. I really admire your brain more and more. I just suddenly remembered that we worked together to kill the 13th prince in the Black Dragon Swamp. So, I wanted to come here to try my luck. I didn't expect to meet you here. What are your last words? Tell me quickly. Zhuge Mingyang said. Last words? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. There's only one thing that puzzles me. Why do you care so much about the first prince? There are some things that you'd better not know. Zhuge Mingyang's eyes turned cold. He put the folding fan back at his waist and took a step toward Qin Feiyang. Boom! At the same time, Chapter 738. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted, Hurry up and leave! Shua! The 4 of them jumped down without hesitation and quickly fell down. Zhuge Mingyang was a 9-Star Wars sect. As for Qin Feiyang and the other 3, Fatso had already broken through to the 3-Star Wars sect, and Qin Feiyang was a 4-Star Wars sect. The auras that Li Li and Li Rong revealed were only 1-Star Wars sect. With their cultivation, even if the 4 of them worked together, they wouldn't have any chance of winning. They could only run. You want to escape? Zhuge Mingyang laughed in disdain, and with a mysterious footwork, he chased after them like a divine rainbow. His speed was actually 4 times faster than before. Li Rong exclaimed, Perfect support technique! At the same time, Qin Feiyang's heart sank. As the most monstrous figure in the great Qin Empire, it wasn't strange for him to possess a perfect support technique. But now, facing Zhuge Mingyang, who was filled with killing intent, they didn't even have the chance to escape. Die. With the cultivation of a 9-Star Wars sect, coupled with the perfect support technique, Zhuge Mingyang's speed was not something that Qin Feiyang and the other 3 could compare to. In the blink of an eye, he had caught up to Qin Feiyang. Killing intent surged in his eyes as he punched out. Boss! Fatso shouted, and without any hesitation, he stood in front of Qin Feiyang. You're very loyal. Zhuge Mingyang laughed coldly. Seeing that Zhuge Mingyang's fist was about to land on Fatso's body, Qin Feiyong waved his hand and brought Fatso into the castle without hesitation. After all, the difference in strength was too great. There was no need to continue fighting. The moment the two of them disappeared, Zhuge Mingyang's expression immediately became sinister. Shua! In a flash, he caught up to Li Rong and grabbed her neck. Li Li's expression changed on the spot, and he shouted, "Let her go!" However, Zhuge Mingyang didn't seem to hear her. He stood in the void, glanced around, and shouted, "Qin Feiyong, come out right now, or I'll kill her!" "How dare you!" Li Li bellowed. "Even the princes have to be courteous to me, let alone killing a nobody." Zhuge Mingyang smiled coldly. His 5 fingers suddenly tightened and crushed Li Rong's neck. Fresh blood instantly dyed the sky red. Schwer! Looking at this scene, Li Li gritted his teeth and rushed towards Zhuge Mingyang like a madman. "You're courting death!" At this moment, Zhuge Mingyang was like a terrifying, murderous demon king. Whoosh! He turned around and stretched out his hand. His 5 fingers curved like an eagle's claw and grabbed at Li Li's head. "Stop!" At this moment, Qin Feiyong came out. The corner of Zhuge Mingyang's mouth lifted. His arm turned in the air and grabbed Li Li's throat. He then turned to look at Qin Feiyong and sneered, "I thought you didn't care about them." As for Li Li, he was only a 1-star battle ancestor. How could he be Zhuge Mingyang's opponent? His throat was grabbed by Zhuge Mingyang, and he didn't have the slightest strength to resist. Qin Feiyong glanced at Zhuge Mingyang and looked at Li Li. "What did you call her just now?" "Schwer." Li Li gritted his teeth, and his face was filled with grief. Qin Feiyong said in a low voice, "Tell me, who exactly are you?" "Who are we?" Li Li muttered to himself and looked at Qin Feiyong. He howled, "Aren't you very smart? Do you still need me to tell you? It really is you. Mu Qing Mu Shue. Qin Feiyong's face was gloomy to the extreme. Previously in the castle, when he heard Li Li call out the name Shue, he suspected that it might be the Mu Qing siblings. He didn't expect it to be these 2 people, but he couldn't understand why these 2 people would walk together with Lu Xingqian. Back then, was it Lu Xingqian who schemed against him in the 9 Nether Yellow Springs? Hearing the conversation between Qin Feiyong and looking at their expressions, Zhuge Mingyang couldn't help but frown and said, "Aren't you friends?" "Friends?" Qin Feiyong sneered, looked at Zhuge Mingyang and said indifferently, "If you want to kill me, do as you wish." Shua! Finished. He disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Zhuge Mingyang was a little confused and didn't know what to do for a moment. In the past, I schemed against him many times and almost caused him to lose his life. Now, I'm afraid he can't wait to kill me with his own hands. How can he be my friend? Mu Qing mocked. Zhuge Mingyang raised his eyebrows, murderous intent surging in his eyes, and said, "In that case, it's useless to keep you alive." "Want to kill me? You don't have the ability." Mu Qing grinned hideously. A peerlessly terrifying aura suddenly rushed out of his body. As soon as this aura appeared, the earth trembled and the void distorted. Even Zhuge Mingyang couldn't help but feel a chill all over his body. Without hesitation, he quickly let go of Mu Qing and the dead Mu Shue, and retreated quickly. Clang! Just as Zhuge Mingyang retreated, a blood-red light burst out from between Mu Qing's eyebrows. It was actually a palm-sized stone door. The stone door was blood-red all over, suspended above Mu Qing's head, as if stained with blood, emitting a shocking aura. This is... Zhuge Mingyang's eyes were full of shock and bewilderment. Mu Qing glared at Zhuge Mingyang coldly, then swooped down and hugged the dead Mu Shue. I'm sorry. I should have taken out the space-time gate earlier, then you wouldn't have died. It's all my fault. Looking at Mu Shue, Er's pale face. Mu Qing's face was full of self-blame. Space-time gate? Zhuge Mingyang frowned. Swoosh! All of a sudden, Mu Qing raised his head and looked at Zhuge Mingyang. His eyes were red like a mad beast. Zhuge Mingyang, right? Just you wait. Sooner or later I'll make you pay with your blood. Space-time gate, awaken! He roared, and a blood-red stream of qi rushed out of his body. This was the qi and blood in his body. It was also the combination of battle qi and blood. As soon as the qi and blood appeared, they continuously rushed toward the stone gate. The stone gate was also crazily absorbing Mu Qing's qi and blood. As it absorbed more and more qi and blood, the stone gate gradually began to grow, and the aura it emitted became stronger and stronger. Not only was Zhuge Mingyang unable to get close, but he was also forced to retreat. However, Mu Qing's body was undergoing earth-shaking changes. His face was becoming old. The flesh and blood in his body were being hollowed out. Soon he became a skinny old man with a face full of wrinkles. Still can't be awakened. He looked at the stone gate that was constantly growing bigger and muttered to himself. His eyes were dim and lifeless. Suddenly, he roared, "Qin Feiyang, come out and help me if you don't want to die." Swoosh! Qin Feiyang appeared. Looking at Mu Qing and the stone gate at this moment, his eyes were full of surprise and doubt. But he didn't help. Mu Qing shouted anxiously, "I can take you out of the capital!" Out of the capital? Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. He did want to leave the capital, but at the same time, this was also the most troublesome problem for him now, because there was only one way to leave the capital. That was through the teleportation altar in the pagoda. However, Elder Qin was guarding the pagoda, and Elder Qin's strength was unfathomable. Moreover, the back mountain was the forbidden area of the imperial palace, and there were powerhouses guarding the entrance. He couldn't find a chance to enter the back mountain at all. So, now that he heard Mu Qing say that he could leave the capital, he couldn't help but be tempted. But he didn't know if he should believe the person who had schemed against him before. "I'm really not lying to you. As long as it's in the great Qin Empire, I can do it wherever you want to go." Seeing that Qin Feiyang was indifferent, Mu Qing was burning with anxiety and roared. "Okay." Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and finally chose to believe Mu Qing this time. Whoosh! He took a step forward and rushed toward Mu Qing. But the aura emitted by the stone door directly sent him flying. That feeling was as if he had been hit by a huge mountain. His body was about to fall apart and blood kept spurting out. Boom! Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly burst with strong murderous intent, and he said sternly, "Even now, you still want to trick me?" "Don't misunderstand. I was careless. Now you can try again." After Mu Qing finished speaking, her mind moved slightly, and the invisible aura in front of Qin Feiyang disappeared into thin air. Qin Feiyang tentatively took a step forward. Seeing that there was no resistance at all, he flew toward Mu Qing with ease. Stop! But at the same time, Zhuge Mingyang roared and chased after Qin Feiyang. "Get lost!" Mu Qing roared angrily, and the invisible aura appeared out of thin air again, directly forcing Zhuge Mingyang back. Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at Zhuge Mingyang in surprise. The aura appeared, but he was not affected at all? Could it be that Mu Qing could control these auras as she wanted? "Hurry up! I can't hold on any longer!" Mu Qing roared. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang turned his head, and in a few blinks of an eye, he landed beside Mu Qing. Looking at the stone door, he frowned and said, "What should I do?" "The same as me," Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang did not hesitate. His body shook, and a stream of qi and blood rushed out of his body and rushed toward the stone door. Immediately, his face was full of horror. When the qi and blood rushed into the stone door, He immediately felt that the stone door was like a bottomless pit, and the stone door began to actively absorb the qi and blood in his body. He looked at the stone door, and a terrifying name appeared in his mind. He suddenly turned to Mu Qing and said in surprise, "Your stone door is a divine weapon." "That's right." Mu Qing nodded. "Bastard, are you crazy?" Qin Feiyang was furious. Without hesitation, he took Wolf King, Fatso, Lu Hong the pangolin, and the black dragon snake out of the castle. "Hurry up and revive the stone door with us," Qin Feiyang shouted. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years. More than half of the qi and blood in his body had been absorbed by the stone door. Seeing this, Fatso and the others were also surprised, but they did not ask anything. They immediately urged their qi and blood to rush toward the stone door. Divine weapon! At the same time, Zhuge Mingyang, who was standing in the distance, also looked at the stone door in shock. "It's a divine weapon!" Suddenly, he came to his senses and immediately took out the image crystal. A golden figure quickly materialized. It was the commander of the invincible Black Army. Without waiting for the Grand Commander to speak, Zhuge Mingyang hurriedly said, "Grand Commander, quickly come to the Black Dragon Pool. Qin Feiyang and the others are here. Moreover, they have a saint artifact in their hands." "What? They have a divine weapon?" Chapter 739. See for yourself if you don't believe me. Zhuge Mingyang turned the image crystal to face Qin Feiyang and the others. Looking at the stone door, the Grand Commander's pupils constricted, and he said, "Give me the coordinates." "Okay." Zhuge Mingyang nodded. Qin Feiyang and the others saw the message between Zhuge Mingyang and the Grand Commander. Mu Qing said anxiously, "Qin Feiyang, is there anyone else in your castle?" Just Zhuge Mingyang alone was enough to make them unable to fight back. If the Grand Commander joined in, they would be doomed. "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "We're done for. With our cultivation, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to revive the space-time gate. We might even be sucked dry by the space-time gate and die." Mu Qing's eyes were filled with despair. "What's the use of saying all this now? Let's work harder. Otherwise, we'll die in the hands of the Grand Commander before our blood is sucked dry by the space-time gate." Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. A sacred artifact was comparable to a 9-star battle saint. It required an extremely vast amount of battle qi and blood to revive. A 9-star battle saint was an invincible existence to Qin Feiyang and the others. Therefore, they were simply digging their own graves by reviving the space-time gate. At this moment, whether it was Qin Feiyang or Fatso and the others, they were all skin and bones. Their lives were in danger. To make matters worse, the Grand Commander came with a group of black armored guards. The cultivation of each of these black armored guards was comparable to Zhuge Mingyang. There were 50 to 60 of them. It's indeed a sacred artifact. As soon as the Grand Commander appeared and sensed the aura emitted by the space-time gate, his face was filled with horror. Zhuge Mingyang said, "Is there any way to stop them?" The Chief Commander shook his head and said, "I can't do it with my strength. I have to call the Chief Commander of the Kirin Army." After saying that, the commander of the invincible Black Army took out an image crystal. "General of the Kirin Army." Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. He looked at Mu Qing gloomily and said, "You've got us into big trouble this time." Mu Qing also looked bitter and helpless. If he had any other choice, he would not have come to the dimensional gate. Fatso asked, "Boss, is the commander of the Kirin Army very strong?" "Very strong, but I'm not too sure how strong they are." However, it is not hard to imagine that the commander of the invincible Black Army would ask him for help. He must be a 9-star battle saint or even higher, because only existences at this level have the strength to contend against sacred artifacts. Qin Feiyang said, a 9-star battle saint, or even higher. Fatso and the others trembled. If this person came, wouldn't they be finished? What's the matter? Right at this moment, an imperious voice echoed in the rift. It was deafening like the chime of a giant bell. Qin Feiyang and the others looked over and saw a burly man standing above the image crystal of the invincible Black Army's chief commander. This man was 8 feet tall and looked like a small giant. His upper body was exposed, revealing his well-developed chest muscles. His long red hair was fluttering behind his back. His whole body emitted a wild aura. Come to the Black Dragon pool quickly. Qin Feiyang has a sacred artifact. The chief commander of the invincible Black Army told the burly man the coordinates. A sacred artifact. The burly man's eyes trembled. He immediately opened a portal and arrived at this place. This aura! He looked at the portal in surprise. His eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "It's really a sacred artifact." Seeing the chief commander of the Kirin army come, Zhuge Mingyang was relieved. He cupped his hands and said, "Chief Commander, we can't let Qin Feiyang escape. As long as I'm here, he won't be able to escape even if he grows wings." The burly man smiled proudly. He stretched out his hand and a terrifying battle chi appeared. It rushed toward Qin Feiyang and the others. Wherever it passed, the void twisted crazily as if it was about to break. Seeing this, Fatso's face changed. He shouted anxiously, "Think of a way!" Even the void was about to break. One could imagine how terrifying the battle chi was. Once they were submerged by the battle chi, they would definitely be crushed into pieces. "There's no other way. We can only hide in the castle for now," Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. If it was in normal times, the castle would be the best place to hide. But it was different now. If they entered the castle now, they would be like a turtle in a jar. Because, once they entered the castle, Zhuge Mingyang and the others would definitely call the Imperial Preceptor. The castle could escape the search of others, but it couldn't escape the search of the Imperial Preceptor's divine sense. At that time, they would only have a dead end. But now there was no other choice. Could it be that we can only wait for death? Wolf King roared in the sky. His eyes were full of unwillingness. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply. This time they had really reached a dead end. And all of this was brought about by Zhuge Mingyang. Swish! He raised his head and looked at Zhuge Mingyang. "If I don't die, I will definitely come back to settle this score with you. Wait until you save your life." Zhuge Mingyang sneered. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. He was about to lead everyone into the castle. But at this moment, boom! A bright battle chi descended from the sky and poured into the space-time gate. Clang! In an instant, the space-time gate became more than 10 feet tall. It emitted a bloody light and released a shocking aura. And at the same time, the space-time gate also stopped absorbing the chi and blood of Qin Feiyang and the others. It's revived. Mu Qing was a little stunned. Who? At the same time, the commander of the Kirin army roared and looked up at the sky. Qin Feiyang and the others also raised their heads to look. They saw a blurry silhouette standing between the clouds. Who is he? Why is he helping us? Fatso was surprised. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "I can't see clearly." "Don't care who it is. Let's go." Mu Qing came back to her senses and immediately carried Mu Shui into the space-time gate without looking back. "Let's go." Qin Feiyang quivered and immediately led Fatso and the others. When the group entered the space-time gate with a loud clang, the space-time gate shrunk rapidly and then disappeared into the void. Damn it! The two commanders were furious. With strong killing intent, they rushed toward the clouds at the same time. But before they could get close, the person standing among the clouds suddenly disappeared from their sight without warning. "Who is it? Get out here for this commander!" The two of them stood in the sky and roared. Their aura was like a torrent, surging in all directions. But after a while, the person did not appear again, and no one responded to them. Below, Zhuge Mingyang's face was also extremely gloomy. He thought that Qin Feiyang would not be able to escape this time, but he did not expect another mysterious person to appear at the critical moment. Even the two Grand Commanders were unable to capture that person's true appearance. From this, it could be seen how powerful this mysterious person was. He could not figure it out. What had Qin Feiyang done all these years? Why was there such a terrifying expert behind him? In the sky above a mountain range, swoosh! Figures appeared out of thin air one after another. It was Qin Feiyang and the others. Where is this? The few of them scanned their surroundings in surprise. The mountain range was vast and boundless, with lush ancient trees and vines. In the mountain stream, they could sense the aura of countless fierce beasts. But the aura of these fierce beasts were not very strong. They were basically between the War Emperor and the War Master. Why does it look so familiar? Wolf King muttered. Clang! The gate of time and space followed closely behind the crowd and appeared in front of Mu Qing. Mu Qing waved her hand, and the space-time gate flew into her glabella. Then she looked at Mu Shui, in her arms, her eyes filled with sadness and anger. Qin Feiyang glanced at Mu Qing and then glanced at the mountain range below. He sympathized with Mu Shui, his experience, but he was not sad, because their relationship was hostile to begin with. The Wolf King suddenly said, I remember now. This place is deep in the mountains outside the provincial capital. Fatso's eyes lit up and he nodded. Yes, 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 Fat Lord also remembered. When Brother Wolf and I went to look for Lion-Headed Eagle and Blood Eagle, we came here. Qin Feiyang said, so this is the spirit state. Fatso and Wolf King nodded. Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly had a trace of disbelief as he turned to look at Mu Qing. But Mu Qing still lowered her head and stared at Mu Shui in a daze. Wolf King suggested, why don't we take a look at the Holy Palace first? We can't go. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Previously, Zhuge Mingyang heard that they were going to leave the capital. Now that they had successfully escaped, the first place Zhuge Mingyang and the others suspected was the spirit state. After all, he used to live in the spirit state. If he went to the Holy Palace now, when the people from the capital came to investigate, not only would his whereabouts be exposed, even those who were related to him would be implicated. So now it was best not to appear in front of others, or even let others know that he was back. Then where are we going now? Lu Hong asked. I don't know either. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, I have to think about it. You guys go to the castle and cultivate. Fatso and the others nodded. Originally, they were very proud of their current cultivation. But when they saw the strength of those people in the capital, especially the state preceptor, they didn't have the courage to fight at all in front of this person, leaving only powerlessness and despair. So now, they had to race against time to improve their strength. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent everyone into the castle. Then he looked at Mu Qing and said, The dead can't be brought back to life, my condolences. Mu Qing suddenly raised his head and glared at Qin Feiyang, roaring, It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, Shui, I wouldn't have died. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, What does it have to do with me? It's you who wanted to follow me. If it weren't for Lu Xingqian's instructions, would I have followed you? Mu Qing smiled disdainfully. Instructions? Qin Feiyang frowned and said, What did Lu Xingqian tell you? What's your relationship with Lu Xingqian? He asked me to take you away from the capital. As for my relationship with him, I have no comment. After Mu Qing finished speaking, he looked down at Mu Shui, with a doting smile on his face and whispered, Shui, don't worry. Brother will take you home soon. Then, Chapter 740. The facial restoration pill was different from other pills. After a person died, it could still help restore their true appearance. Soon, Mu Shui and Mu Qing both returned to their original appearances. After all these years, the siblings didn't change much, but they were much more mature than before, especially Mu Qing. Now she was 185 meters tall, with a thin face with distinct features. Her dark eyes were like two black gems, and she exuded a steady temperament. Qin Feiyang sized up the siblings and frowned. "Why did you hide your identities?" Mu Qing sneered. "If we didn't hide our identities, would you let us follow you?" Qin Feiyang fell silent. If he really knew their identities from the beginning, not only would he not let them follow him, but he would also kill them immediately. "I'm going back to the Forgotten Land soon. Do you want to come with me?" Mu Qing said. "I don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "You don't know? Do you think you have anywhere else to go now? There's no place for you in the great Qin Empire now." Mu Qing sneered. Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Your space-time gate can directly teleport you to the Forgotten Land." "No," Mu Qing said. "No." Qin Feiyang was stunned. "Then, how did you come to the spiritual state from the Forgotten Land?" Mu Qing said, "Although my space-time gate can't, the real space-time gate can." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang became more and more puzzled. "There are some things that I can tell you. Shui, and I came to the great Qin Empire to find Lu Xingqian. Back then, an old man in my clan divined that Lu Xingqian was in the netherworld. So he opened the real door of time and space and sent us directly to the 9 underworlds. Later on, we met Lu Xingqian in the 9 underworlds, Yellow Springs. Since then, we have been hiding in his spatial divine item." Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang frowned. When he was trapped by Mo Wuxian and the others and fell into the sea of bitterness, he went to Lu Xingqian's spatial divine item. He remembered that these two people weren't in the spatial divine item at that time. Oh, right. Lu Xingqian had once told him that the secret chamber was only a part of his spatial divine item. There was an even larger space outside the secret chamber. It seemed that Mu Qing and her brother were hiding in the space outside the secret chamber at that time. After pondering for a moment, Qin Feiyang said, "In other words, it was Lu Xingqian who brought you to the capital." "That's right." Mu Qing nodded. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. "Why are you looking for him?" "I can't tell you about this." Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang frowned slightly and asked, "Then what's the deal with the door of time and space?" "The real door of time and space can teleport you to anywhere. For example, in the Great Qin Empire, it can directly teleport you to the 9 underworlds, Yellow Springs, or the Forgotten Land. The door of time and space on me is just a replica. It can only teleport you to and from the same continent." Mu Qing said. "A replica?" Qin Feiyang was in disbelief. If a replica was so amazing, how terrifying would the real door of time and space be? "I've told you everything that I can. I can't say anything. Even if you kill me now, I won't say anything. Do you want to go to the Forgotten Land? Make a decision, quickly." Mu Qing said expressionlessly. "Wait." Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand, thought for a moment, and said, "There's another question. When you schemed against me in the 9 underworlds, Yellow Springs, was it also related to Lu Xingqian?" "No. At that time, I hadn't seen Lu Xingqian yet, and I didn't know about your relationship with Lu Xingqian. So I wanted to get rid of you with the help of Feng Wuxia and the others. After all, we had a deep grudge in the Forgotten Land. I had to make the first move. But later, I met Lu Xingqian and learned about your relationship with him. So I gave up the idea of killing you. And Lu Xingqian repeatedly told me not to touch you." Mu Qing said. "It's good that it's okay." Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief. He was worried that Lu Xingqian was the one behind all of this. If that was the case, then entrusting Ren Wuxuang to Lu Xingqian was tantamount to pushing her to a dead end. And now, at least it meant that Lu Xingqian didn't have any malice towards him for the time being. As long as he didn't fall out with Lu Xingqian, Ren Wuxuang's safety would be guaranteed. After thinking for a moment, Qin Feiyang said, "Where did you and Lu Xingqian meet?" "It was when Feng Wuxie and the others ambushed you. At that time, Shui, and I were hiding not far away." Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang thought carefully for a moment and said, "Was it the time when Lu Xingqian found the flower of death?" "Yes. At that time when you were fighting with Feng Wuxie and the others, I took the opportunity to send a message to Lu Xingqian. While you weren't paying attention, he quietly sneaked to see me and later rescued Feng Wuxie and the others from your hands. And in order not to arouse your suspicion, we deliberately left the flower of death unpicked. But we didn't expect that in the end, because of the flower of death, you caught Lu Xingqian in the act." Mu Qing explained. "I see." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and said, "So, you know the reason why Lu Xingqian saved them?" "Yes." Mu Qing nodded and said, "But I can't tell you." As soon as she finished speaking, Qin Feiyang took a step forward, grabbed Mu Qing's neck, and said coldly, "If you don't tell me, I'll kill you." "Then kill me." Mu Qing looked at Qin Feiyang calmly, without the slightest panic or fear. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and finally let go of his hand, saying, "You and Lu Xingqian have known each other for a long time?" Mu Qing took a few breaths and shook her head. "No, I've never seen him before we met in the netherworld." Qin Feiyang's eyes were suddenly filled with surprise and doubt. "If you've never met him, then why did Mu Qing come to Lu Xingqian? What secrets does Lu Xingqian have that no one knows?" He felt that the current situation was getting more and more mysterious. He pondered for a while. A flash of light suddenly flashed in his eyes, and he said, "Wait a moment, I'll go to the castle to discuss with everyone." Mu Qing nodded. Qin Feiyang flashed and entered the castle. Fatso and the others were not cultivating. They all had their heads lowered, as if they were thinking. Seeing Qin Feiyang come in, Fatso immediately looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, "Boss, Mu Qing's identity is not simple." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang asked. "The space-time gate. Look, the space-time gate on Mu Qing's body is just a replica. But this replica is actually a sacred artifact. Isn't this too unbelievable? Similarly, if the replica space-time gate is a sacred artifact, then what level of weapon is the real space-time gate? I really don't dare to think about it." Fatso said, his eyes full of fear. Lu Hong added, "There's one more point. I believe everyone has deeply experienced how difficult it is to revive a sacred artifact." Fatso, Wolf King, and the other beasts nodded. Just now, if it weren't for the help of that mysterious person, they wouldn't have been able to revive the space-time gate at all. In the end, they might even have lost their lives, because at that time, the space-time gate was actively absorbing the qi and blood in their bodies. They were already helpless. In short, the space-time gate was forcibly absorbing their qi and blood. This was the price to pay for forcefully reviving a sacred artifact, because their cultivation was not enough. Think about it. Reviving the replica space-time gate already requires so much qi and blood. How much qi and blood would it take to revive the real space-time gate? It's definitely not as simple as 1 or 2 times. But Mu Qing said that he and Mu Shui entered the 9 levels of hell through the real space-time gate. What does this mean? This means that the people in Mu Qing's clan have the ability to revive the real space-time gate. Lu Hong said. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. A sacred artifact could only be revived by a 9-star battle saint at the very least. The real space-time gate's level was definitely higher than a sacred artifact. This meant that there was someone in Mu Qing's clan who surpassed the battle saint level. And this Lu Xingqian was actually related to such a behemoth? It was really too strange. Qin Feiyang was silent for a while, then asked, "So what do you mean?" "We have to go to the Forgotten Land. Since we can't get the answer from Lu Xingqian, then we have to go to the Forgotten Land and start from the clan behind Mu Qing." Fatso said, "Yes, we have to investigate thoroughly." I have a feeling that Lu Xingqian, Mu Qing, and the clan behind Mu Qing are planning a big conspiracy. And I think it has something to do with you. Lu Hong said worriedly. "Why do you think so?" Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Hong said, "If it has nothing to do with you, why would they help you?" "That's right." Qin Feiyang gave Lu Hong a thumbs up, looked at the two of them, and said with a smile, "What you said is basically the same as what I think." Fatso was slightly stunned and said, "So, before entering the castle, you had already made up your mind to go to the Forgotten Land." "That's right. I don't know if you have noticed, but Lu Xingqian really wants me to go to the Forgotten Land. If that's the case, then I'll do as he wishes. I'd like to see what's hidden in the Forgotten Land." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed, and he left the castle, looked at Mu Qing, and said, "Okay, I'll go to the Forgotten Land with you. But the problem is that your space-time gate can't transport us there. How are we going to get there?" Mu Qing said, "That depends on you." "Me?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "The person guarding the teleportation altar in Butterfly Valley now is Ren Wushuang's grandfather. With your relationship with him, it shouldn't be difficult to get him to let us go, right?" Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Is there no other way?" "No. If you can contact my clan, it won't be so troublesome. Just use the Real Spacetime gate to take us there. But my clansmen are all in the Forgotten Land, and I can't contact them at all, so I can only go to Butterfly Valley." Mu Qing said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and said, "Then I'll try to find him." Mu Qing said, "Let me hide in your castle first." Qin Feiyang was stunned and said, "Why? Can't you see the light? It's okay to meet Ren Wushuang's grandfather, but if I'm found by that snow python, I'll be in big trouble." Mu Qing said, her eyes full of fear. "Snow python?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, "Is the snow python you're talking about the one lurking in the ice lake?" "Yes. It's the guardian of the teleportation altar in the Forgotten Land." Mu Qing nodded. "It's just as I thought." Chapter 741. Butterfly Valley. It was as quiet and peaceful as ever. The sea of flowers, lakes, grasslands, and forests had not changed at all. At this moment, on the shore of the lake, a white-haired old man was leaning against a thick willow tree, holding a fishing rod and concentrating on fishing. Suddenly, the float that was floating on the surface of the water suddenly sank. The white-haired old man was refreshed and pulled up hard. A big fish, as long as an arm, was pulled up to the shore. What a big harvest today! The old man was very happy. But suddenly, the old man raised his eyebrows and looked up at the sky. He saw a white figure appear out of thin air in the sky. "Qin Feiyang, are my eyes playing tricks on me?" The white-haired old man was stunned. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. Suddenly, his eyebrows were full of surprise. The white figure was still there. This meant that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Old master, you're quite relaxed." "That's right. The white-haired old man fishing was Ren Wushuang's grandfather." "Kid, aren't you in the capital?" The old man looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. Swish! Qin Feiyang smiled, swooped down, and landed beside the old man. Looking at the big fish struggling on the ground, he said, "It's a good harvest." The old man frowned and said, "Answer my question. Why did you suddenly come back?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "I can't stay in the capital anymore, so I can only come back and continue to follow you." The old man said angrily, "Get lost, don't talk nonsense." Did you get into trouble in the capital? Qin Feiyong was stunned. He shook his head and said with a wry smile, I really can't hide anything from you. I knew it. You little bastard won't let people feel at ease. The old man glared at him angrily and said, Tell me what's going on. Qin Feiyong said, I'll tell you if you promise not to be angry. Okay, I promise not to be angry, the old man said. It's all because I'm in the imperial capital, but at this point Qin Feiyong stopped abruptly. After pondering for a moment, he shook his head and said, Forget it. It's better that you don't know about these things. Are you asking for a beating? The old man's face instantly darkened, and his veins bulged. I'm not joking. I don't want to make things difficult for you, Qin Feiyong said. Although the old man had already stepped down from his position, he was still a member of the great Qin Empire in the end, and he was an upright person. If the old master knew that he had killed the princes, he would definitely be put in a difficult position. The old man looked at him deeply and said helplessly, All right, this old man won't care about young people's affairs. After saying that, he smiled and said, You came back at the right time. Let's go. This old man will boil a pot of fresh fish soup for you to try. Qin Feiyong glanced at the big fish and shook his head. I'm afraid I won't be able to eat it this time. Immediately after, Old man, I'm here because I need your help with something, Yangming said sternly. What is it? The old man was suspicious. Qin Feiyong said, I want to go to the Forgotten Land. Go to the Forgotten Land? The old man frowned. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. The old man asked suspiciously, What are you going to do there? Qin Feiyong said, I have some personal matters to take care of. The old man pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, That place is not simple if you don't explain it clearly. This old man will not let you go. Not simple? Qin Feiyong's heart skipped a beat and asked, Can you tell me, what kind of place is the Forgotten Land? This old man is not very clear either. I only heard from the previous mansion master that the Forgotten Land is a very terrifying place. Furthermore, the emperor had personally ordered that no one was allowed to enter the Forgotten Land without his permission. The old man said in a deep voice, There's such a thing? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Since the emperor had personally ordered it, then why did you ask him to go to the Forgotten Land to snatch the heavenly thunder flame back then? Wasn't this tantamount to disobeying the emperor's order? One had to know. Disobeying the emperor's order was a capital offense. And after hearing the old man's words, he recalled that Zhu Yu didn't desire the heavenly thunder flame so much back then. Could it be that Zhu Yu didn't ask him to go to the Forgotten Land because of the heavenly thunder flame, but for other reasons? Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and said, Old man, I have to go to the Forgotten Land. Please make an exception. The old man said, I can make an exception, but you have to tell this old man the reason. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to the Forgotten Land to investigate Lu Xingqian. Investigate him? The old man was stunned. What did Lu Xingqian have to do with the Forgotten Land? To tell you the truth, after Lu Xingqian entered the imperial capital, he became more mysterious than before, and there were people from the Forgotten Land who came to find him. Qin Feiyong secretly said, How is that possible? The old man looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly. I'm telling the truth. I'll tell you the details after I've investigated it, okay? The old man hesitated for a moment and nodded. Okay, this old man will let you go. Thank you, old man. Qin Feiyong was overjoyed, hurriedly cupped his hands and thanked him, and then asked, By the way, is there only one entrance to the Forgotten Land? This old man only knows that there is only one entrance in the 9 provinces. But this old man doesn't know about the imperial capital. The old man said. Qin Feiyong nodded thoughtfully and said with a smile, I understand there's no time to lose. Let's go to the teleportation altar immediately. As he spoke, he opened a portal. In such a hurry, The old man was stunned and sighed. I wanted to have a good chat with you. It seems that we can only wait for the future. After saying that, he stepped into the portal. Qin Feiyang followed behind. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the two appeared in the secret chamber below the Butterfly Valley. The old man waved his hand, and his battle aura surged into the teleportation altar. After a while, the teleportation altar shone brightly. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang jumped onto the altar and turned to look at the old man. If people from the imperial capital come to find me, don't say that I went to the Forgotten Land and that you didn't see me. What do you mean? The old man was surprised. But before Qin Feiyang could answer, the altar teleported him away. What on earth is this kid doing? The old man muttered suspiciously, then turned and walked out of the secret chamber. But just as he returned to the lake and was about to deal with the big fish, whoosh! One by one, black armored guards descended on the Butterfly Valley. The leader was a man in golden armor, and his aura was soaring to the sky. Who is it? The old man suddenly looked up, and his face was full of surprise. Even the weakest of these people was stronger than him. But when he saw the armor on those guards, his face suddenly changed. Greetings, lords. He hurriedly bowed. He had been to the imperial capital before, so he naturally recognized the clothes of these guards. The man in golden armor said, I am the commander of the invincible Black Army. The old man's eyes trembled, and he respectfully said, Greetings, Commander. The commander said, Are you the guardian of this place? Yes, I am. The old man respectfully replied. The commander asked, Did you see Qin Feiyang come back? Qin Feiyang? The old man's heart skipped a beat, and he suspiciously said, Isn't Qin Feiyang in the imperial capital? The commander said, Not long ago he escaped from the imperial capital. Escaped? The old man was surprised and asked, Why did he escape? He killed the current crown prince and the princes. His Majesty has issued an arrest warrant for him. If you don't want to get yourself into trouble, tell me honestly, did you see him or not? The Grand Commander asked in a stern voice. What? That bastard actually caused such a big trouble. The old man's body and mind trembled. Did this bastard eat a leopard's guts to kill the crown prince and the princes? He couldn't help but struggle in his heart. If he didn't report it, he wouldn't be able to live with his conscience. However, he loved Qin Feiyang more than he hated him. He really couldn't bear to let Qin Feiyang fall into eternal damnation. On one hand, it was justice, and on the other hand, it was personal feelings. He really didn't know how to choose. The commander said in a deep voice, You haven't spoken for a long time. It seems that you have seen him. No, no, no. The old man's face suddenly changed. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, Sir, don't misunderstand. I was shocked. How dare he do such a disgraceful thing? This little bastard really has no respect for the law. Obviously, in the end, he still chose to help Qin Feiyang. Isn't that right? It's because of him that the imperial capital is now in chaos. The commander sighed deeply and believed the old man's words. He said, Since you don't know, then I won't waste my time. Then he turned to look at the 10 guards standing in the front row behind him and ordered, Stay here. Once you see Qin Feiyang, kill him without mercy. Yes, the 10 guards responded respectfully. After that, the Grand Commander left with the other guards. The old man wiped his cold sweat and was extremely angry. He muttered, Brat, you better be right. Otherwise, this old man won't forgive you. At the same time, Forgotten Land, Glacier Forest, Qin Feiyang fell into the ice lake again. The lake water was bone-chilling cold. But today was different from the past. With his current cultivation, this cold was no longer a threat to him. At the same time, when Qin Feiyang fell into the ice lake, the ferocious beasts lurking in the ice lake opened their bloody mouths and rushed towards him. Boom! However, Qin Feiyang only released his pressure, and the ferocious beasts scattered. But they did not leave. They surrounded in the distance and stared at Qin Feiyang vigilantly. Qin Feiyang stood in the lake. His eyes flashed slightly, and he dived towards the bottom of the lake. Soon, he saw the snow python again. It was dozens of meters long, and its whole body was as white as jade. Just like the last time he saw it, it was sleeping. However, Qin Feiyang still couldn't see through the snow python's cultivation. How strong is it? Looking at the snow python, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but have a trace of suspicion in his eyes. A moment later, he decisively turned and rushed towards the lake. It was better not to provoke such a terrifying existence. Boom! After a few breaths, a huge wave was set off on the lake. Qin Feiyang rushed out and stood above the ice lake, scanning the surroundings. In the sky, snow was falling. The cold current roared in the void. On the ground, it was all snow-white. After so many years, this glacier didn't change much. I'm here again. Chapter 742. After leaving the ice lake, Qin Feiyang landed on the peak of an ice mountain. With a wave of his hand, Mu Qing appeared out of thin air with Mu Shui in her arms. Qin Feiyang said, "I've come to the Forgotten Land as you wished. What's next?" Next, as Mu Qing said this, she suddenly looked behind Qin Feiyang and bowed. "Greetings, Tower Master." Tower Master? Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled, and he hurriedly turned his head to look. But there was no trace of the Tower Master behind him. Qin Feiyang immediately realized that he had been tricked and hurriedly turned to look at Mu Qing. At that moment, Mu Qing had already opened a teleportation gate and walked into it. "My mission is to bring you to the Forgotten Land. Everything else has nothing to do with me." After saying this, Mu Qing disappeared without a trace. Damn it! Qin Feiyang's face darkened. He did not expect to be tricked by this person again. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, Wolf King, Fatso, and the pangolin appeared. "Hee boss, I didn't expect you to have such a day." As soon as Fatso appeared, he laughed sinisterly. "Get lost." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, "If I remember correctly, the Lu tribe is outside the glacier." "Yes, the battle kings in the tribe were all killed by us." "Why? You want to eliminate the source of the trouble." Fatso looked at him in surprise. "It's just a small tribe. Do you have to go through so much trouble? My targets are the Ziyang tribe, the Mingwang tribe, and the Black Tortoise tribe." Qin Feiyang said. At the mention of these three tribes, the long-sealed memories rushed out of his mind. Back then, on the eve of leaving the Forgotten Land, the three leaders of the Ziyang tribe, the Mingwang tribe, and the Black Tortoise tribe almost killed them. If Wolf King hadn't taken the Juka Yellow Dragon pill at the critical moment, if it wasn't for the mysterious lady saving them, they would have already turned into white bones. It didn't matter if he didn't come here. It was all in the past, anyway. But since he was here, he had to settle the score. Fatso, Wolf King, and the pangolin also recalled these events, and a cold light flashed in their eyes. Qin Feiyang said, "Go to the three major tribes immediately. I want them to disappear." "What about you?" Wolf King asked. "I'll go to White Fox City. Once you're done, come to White Fox City to look for me." Qin Feiyang said, "Why are we going to White Fox City? Have you forgotten that the mysterious madam is in White Fox City?" Fatso and Wolf King's expressions changed. "Of course not. I'm going there this time to see her." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he opened a teleportation gate and walked in. "Is our boss crazy?" Fatso turned to look at Wolf King and the pangolin with bewilderment. "He should be crazy." Wolf King nodded. "Who cares if he's crazy or not? I can't control the desolate power in my body anyway." The pangolin chuckled. Fatso and Wolf King looked at it in surprise, and a sinister smile appeared in their eyes. "Let's split up," The Wolf King said. Then, each of them opened a portal and walked in. Purple Sun Tribe. After so many years, this famous tribe was still as prosperous as before. Swoosh! A palm-sized beast shadow suddenly descended in the sky above the Purple Sun Tribe. It was Wolf King. Wolf King stood against the wind and swept his gaze below. He chuckled and shouted, "Old thing, come out and die!" His voice was like a bell that reverberated in all directions. "Who is it?" In front of the gate of the tribe, there were two burly men wearing black leopard skin windbreakers. They looked very impressive. Hearing Wolf King shout, they immediately looked up at Wolf King with cold eyes. "You don't even remember Lord Wolf. Your memory is too bad, isn't it?" Wolf King snorted coldly and stretched out his little paw. A powerless pressure immediately surged out. "Ah!" Before the two burly men could react, they screamed and blood splattered on the spot. "Who dares to cause trouble in my Purple Sun Tribe?" They must be tired of living. For a moment, following a series of angry roars, people wearing animal skins rushed out from the tribe below. "So many people want to die. All right, I'll fulfill your wishes." Wolf King's killing intent surged. He pointed his paw in the air, and a bright battle chi roared out. Wherever the battle chi went, the people of the Purple Sun Tribe died one by one like ants. Blood rained down and dyed the sky red. "Who is it?" Suddenly, a fierce roar exploded. A skinny middle-aged man flew up into the sky and glared at Wolf King. On the left side of his face, there was a scar like a centipede. It was extremely ferocious. That's right, this man was the leader of the Purple Sun Tribe. "You're finally out." Wolf King grinned and looked at the leader of the Purple Sun Tribe. He shook his head and sighed. "Sigh. When we left that year, you were already a 9-star combat emperor. Now, you're still a 9-star combat emperor. Why are you so useless?" That year, the leader of the Purple Sun Tribe raised his eyebrows and suddenly thought of something. He shouted in anger, "It's you!" Wolf King laughed. "That's right, it's me, your Lord Wolf." The leader of the Purple Sun Tribe's face twisted and his eyes were filled with hatred. He said, "Where's Qin Feiyong, that little bastard?" Although on the surface, the Purple Sun Tribe was still as prosperous as before. In fact, after losing the alchemy fire, the overall strength of the tribe had dropped by a level. And all of this was caused by Qin Feiyong and the bastard in front of him. "Little bastard." Wolf King's eyes turned cold and said, "Old bastard, today we'll settle our old scores." After saying that, that terrifying aura instantly enveloped the entire Purple Sun Tribe. So strong? How many years has it been? How did it become so terrifying? The leader of the Purple Sun Tribe glared at him in disbelief. At the same time, in the sky above the Black Tortoise Tribe, the pangolin returned to his original form. He was like a towering mountain with a ferocious aura that intimidated everyone. In front of him stood a 2-meter-tall burly man. His cultivation was also a 9-star combat emperor, and this burly man was the leader of the Black Tortoise Tribe. The pangolin looked at the leader of the Black Tortoise Tribe with disdain and said, "Tell me, how do you want to die?" "Impossible." However, the leader of the Black Tortoise Tribe shook his head as if he didn't hear what the pangolin said. "Nothing is impossible. You can only blame yourselves for provoking us in the past." The pangolin sneered. The same thing was happening in the sky above the Bright King Tribe. A middle-aged man in white stood in the sky and stared at Fatso in shock. This man was about 1.75 meters tall and had white hair at his temples. He gave off a sense of vicissitudes. He was the leader of the Bright King Tribe, Luo Guang. "You didn't expect this, did you? The insignificant person who is comparable to an ant in your eyes has now grown to the point where even you can only look up to him." Fatso chuckled. Luo Guang's pupils contracted and he asked with difficulty, "What is your cultivation level now?" 3-star combat grandmaster. Fatso said. Luo Guang's face turned pale with fright. Fatso sneered and said, "Go to hell and repent slowly." After that, he waved his hand and the black dragon battle Qi roared in the sky and charged towards Luo Guang. At the same time, White Fox City, although the city wasn't big, it had been around for a long time. Qin Feiyang didn't conceal himself and landed in the sky above the governor's mansion. "Who is it?" Suddenly, an old man's roar rang out from below. Following closely, 2 figures flew up into the sky and stared at Qin Feiyang in bewilderment. One of them was a tall and sturdy man. He wore a black beast skin and emitted a wild aura. The other person was an old man. The clothes on his body were actually made of snake skin. He was skinny and looked a little scary. Both of their cultivations were at the 7-star combat grandmaster. Looking at the 2 of them, Qin Feiyang looked surprised and asked, "You guys aren't dead yet?" Their faces darkened. Old man Snakeskin said angrily, "Who the hell are you? What are you doing here? You don't remember?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. How long had he been gone? And he had already forgotten about him. However, Qin Feiyang was no stranger to these 2 people. The 2 of them were the leaders of the tribes near White Fox City. Back then, they had even joined forces with him to deal with the Meng family. However, unfortunately, they were controlled by the mysterious lady with a slave seal. At that time, they even offered the tribe's pill fire to him, which allowed the nether devil flame to rise to the 3rd grade. He still remembered that there was an old woman at that time, who was also the leader of a nearby tribe. However, she was later killed by the mysterious lady because she contradicted her. However, the cultivation of these 2 people was far beyond his expectations. If he remembered correctly, these 2 people were only 5-star combat emperors at that time. But how many years had it been? They actually broke through 2 small realms in a row. This kind of speed was nothing to him. However, for ordinary people it was incredible. Looking at the 2 of them, Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You still don't remember?" The 2 of them looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, the burly man's gaze trembled and said, "You're Qin Feiyang." When old man Snakeskin heard this, his stooped body couldn't help but tremble. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. Old man Snakeskin immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, young master." Young master? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He didn't expect to have the chance to hear this title. The burly man was also stunned. Then he said in a low voice, "What are you doing? Did you forget the lady's order? He is no longer the young master." Yes, that year the lady said that if she saw Qin Feiyang again, he would be an enemy. Old man Snakeskin seemed to have just woken up from a dream. His face darkened and he said, "I didn't expect you to dare to come back." "Why not?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "That year, when you robbed the Ziyang tribe, Mingwang tribe and Black Tortoise tribe, the lady took a great risk to save you. But what about you? You're ungrateful and sneaked away? I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. The lady has already decided to kill you. This time, I guarantee that you won't be able to return." The 2 of them sneered. Decided to kill. Chapter 743. You still dare to come and see Madam. I really admire your courage. Follow us if you're not afraid of death. Old man Snakeskin and the burly man sneered, then turned around and dived down. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and followed behind the 2 unhurriedly with a faint smile. There was a garden below, covering an area of about 1,000 feet and covered with a layer of pure white snow. On one side of the garden there was a large hall. It was tall and majestic, emitting an ancient aura. At the door there were many guards wearing leopard fur coats, standing straight with spirited eyes. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang and the other 2 landed in front of the hall one after another. Greetings to the two lords. Those guards immediately bowed to the burly man and the burly man. Qin Feiyang teased, "You're pretty impressive." "Shut up," Old Man Snakeskin shouted coldly, then said to the burly man, "You guard outside, I'll bring him in." "Okay." The burly man nodded. "Follow me," Old Man Snakeskin said to Qin Feiyang without turning his head, then strode into the hall. Indeed, he has the potential to be a watchdog. Qin Feiyang looked at the burly man with a mocking gaze, then entered the hall. Crack! The burly man clenched his fists, staring at Qin Feiyang, his whole body emitting a shocking, killing intent. A guard next to him asked in a low voice, "Lord, is he really Qin Feiyang?" "Yes." The burly man nodded. Idle. Those guards' eyes were filled with worship. But looking at everyone's reaction, the burly man raised his eyebrows, and his expression became gloomier. More importantly, the guards next to him didn't notice, and kept whispering to each other. It's said that Qin Feiyang's group not only robbed the Purple Sun tribe, Bright King tribe, and Black Tortoise tribe's Pillfires, but also plundered their treasure vaults. It can be said that he's famous. I've also heard of this. Furthermore, this Qin Feiyang was once taken in as a personal disciple by the Pill Tower's Tower Master. If I remember correctly, the old patriarch also died at the hands of this Qin Feiyang. Tisk, TSK, this guy is really fierce. I truly never expected that we would have the opportunity to meet him in person. Hearing these discussions, the burly man's eyes became more and more hazy. "Shut up." In the end, he abruptly turned his head, glanced at the guards, and gloomily said, "If I hear the name Qin Feiyang again, don't blame me for being merciless." The guards shrank their necks and immediately fell silent. Their eyes were filled with fear. Meanwhile, Qin Feiyang followed behind Old Man Snakeskin and went straight to the second floor of the main hall. In front of a door, Old Man Snakeskin raised his arm and gently knocked on the door. He said respectfully, "Master, Qin Feiyang is back." Bang! Before his voice died away, the door in front of Qin Feiyang and Old Man Snakeskin was smashed into pieces by a huge force. Old Man Snakeskin was startled and instinctively retreated. Following that, a beautiful woman appeared at the door like lightning. She was wearing a mink fur coat, and her long black hair was tied up high, looking graceful and luxurious. That's right, it was the mysterious lady. She stood at the door, staring at Qin Feiyang. Her face was full of anger and killing intent. Seeing this, Old Man Snakeskin next to her couldn't help but gloat. But Qin Feiyang was very calm, and without the slightest fear, he said with a smile, "Senior, I know you miss me very much, but you don't have to be so excited." Old Man Snakeskin immediately staggered and fell flat on his face. Was there something wrong with this person's brain? How dare he flirt with the lady? Looking at Old Man Snakeskin's embarrassed appearance, the anger in the beautiful woman's heart rose. She shouted, "Useless trash, get out!" Old Man Snakeskin's body trembled, and he hurriedly rolled and crawled downstairs. Then the beautiful woman looked at Qin Feiyang with a bone-chilling gaze and said, "You still dare to come back?" Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, "I didn't do anything wrong. Why wouldn't I dare to come back?" Finished. Without waiting for the beautiful woman to speak, he walked into the beautiful woman's room and glanced around. After so many years, the layout here hadn't changed much. The beautiful woman frowned, turned around and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Then that year, why did you run away?" The leaders of the 3 tribes, the City Lord of Sky Thunder City, and the Tower Master of Pill Tower, all wanted to destroy me. How could I not run away? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. "Is that so? But why do I remember that you were already out of danger at that time?" The beautiful woman's gaze was unkind. What a difficult woman. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but have a headache and said helplessly, "Well, I admit, at that time we chose to run away. was indeed to get rid of your control. The beautiful woman said, I'm afraid this is only one aspect. Qin Feiyang was startled and asked suspiciously, Senior, why do you say that? Don't play dumb with me. You're not from the Forgotten Land at all. According to my speculation, the reason you came to the Forgotten Land last time should be for the flame of heavenly thunder. Am I wrong? The beautiful woman said. Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted. This woman's brain was terrifying, right? Tell me, who exactly are you? What is your purpose in coming to the Forgotten Land this time? The beautiful woman said. Then can you tell me, who are you? You have to know, even the imperial capital of the great Qin Empire doesn't have many perfect battle arts. But back then, you gave us 7 perfect battle arts. 7 perfect battle arts? What kind of concept is that? I think your background must not be simple either. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly and asked back. You still remember that I gave you 7 perfect battle arts, such a great kindness, and you're repaying me like this? The beautiful woman was so angry that she laughed. Of course, we haven't forgotten your great kindness. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to visit you as soon as I came to the Forgotten Land. Qin Feiyang smiled. The beautiful woman's face darkened, and she said angrily, Stop talking nonsense. Answer my question. All right, I'll tell you the truth. This time I came to the Forgotten Land for the flame of heavenly thunder. As for my identity, I'm just a nobody. There's no need to talk about it. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Really? The beautiful woman looked at him suspiciously. More real than a pearl. Qin Feiyang nodded. The beautiful woman pondered for a while and nodded. All right, I'll believe you for now, but you didn't come to visit me just to see me, right? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. I really can't hide anything from Senior's eyes. Actually, I came to ask for Senior's help. I can't help you, because now I don't want to be enemies with the Pill Tower. The beautiful woman said with a hint of fear in her tone. Qin Feiyang was a little puzzled. That year, this person was able to save them from the Tower Master's hands, which was enough to show that her strength was not weaker than the Tower Master. Since she had such strength, what was there to be afraid of? The beautiful woman did not explain and said, I also advise you to give up on the idea of snatching the flame of heavenly thunder, because it will bring you endless trouble. Qin Feiyang frowned. The beautiful woman said, Believe me, I'm not trying to scare you. This? Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment and smiled. Let me think about it. Oh, right. There's one more thing that I need Senior's help with. What is it? The beautiful woman was puzzled. Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and a cluster of pill fire appeared. It was the cluster of 5th grade pill fire that he snatched from the pill hall. Ah, 5th grade pill fire. The beautiful woman was quite surprised. Qin Feiyang said calmly, Senior, can you help me erase the blood contract inside? Let me see. The beautiful woman waved her hand, and battle qi gushed out, rushing towards the pill fire. This blood contract. Immediately, a look of shock appeared on the beautiful woman's face. Swish! She raised her head to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, Who is the original owner of this pill fire? Qin Feiyang said vaguely, An expert that I can't afford to offend. You can't afford to offend him. And you even snatched the pill fire from him? The beautiful woman looked at him in disbelief. I'm lucky. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. Luck? I don't believe that you have such good luck. This blood contract, I can erase it, but I have a condition. The beautiful woman said. What? It can be erased. Qin Feiyang was secretly shocked. One had to know. The owner of this cluster of pill fire was the hall master of the Divine Palace Pill Hall. This person's cultivation had definitely surpassed the battle master. Since the beautiful woman was so confident, could it be that she was even stronger than the hall master of the pill hall? He began to regret. If he knew that the beautiful woman was so ridiculously strong, he wouldn't have come back even if he was beaten to death. After calming down a little from the shock in his heart, he asked, "What conditions?" The beautiful woman said, "Continue to follow me." This, Qin Feiyang hesitated for a while and nodded. "That's not a problem." The family behind Mu Qing was scary and mysterious. If he was alone, he might not be able to find anything. If he had the beautiful woman's help, he might be able to get twice the result with half the effort. At the very least, even if the beautiful woman couldn't help much in this matter, she could still protect him at the crucial moment. That meant that he had a strong backer. "Don't agree too early. I have a condition from before. You must be controlled by the slave seal." The beautiful woman said, "This kid was too cunning. If there wasn't the slave seal, the situation a few years ago might happen again." After hearing that, Qin Feiyang instantly frowned. The reason why the old snakeskin and the muscular man were so loyal to the beautiful woman was because they were controlled by the slave seal. Moreover, he still remembered clearly that the beautiful woman said that once one was controlled by the slave seal, she could kill someone from 1,000 miles away with just a thought. In other words, as long as one was controlled by the slave seal, no matter where one ran, they wouldn't be able to escape from the beautiful woman's palm. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and kept the alchemy fire. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I don't like being controlled." After that, Qin Feiyang turned around and left without hesitation, and he ran away in a hurry. In the past, he only felt that the woman was strong but not scary. However, when he heard that this person could actually erase the blood contract in the alchemy fire, he immediately realized that this was an existence that he couldn't afford to offend. However, unexpectedly, the beautiful woman didn't stop him. She just silently watched Qin Feiyang leave. Chapter 744. Qin Feiyang ran out of the hall as if he was running for his life. Seeing that the beautiful woman did not chase after him, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But immediately after, a trace of suspicion crept into his eyes. If the beautiful woman forced him to stay, he would not have a chance to escape. He might not even be able to enter the castle. But why did she not stop him? He came out alive. At the same time, seeing Qin Feiyang run out unscathed, the burly man and the others were surprised. "Are you disappointed?" Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully and rushed into the sky without looking back. "Qin Feiyang, how dare you come back?" But suddenly, a furious roar, filled with resentment, sounded from below. Before the voice finished, a middle-aged man in a tiger fur coat rushed into the sky with a monstrous, murderous aura. Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at this person suspiciously. Suddenly, he revealed a look of realization. This person was the Meng family's patriarch, Meng Yiping. Meng Yiping stared at him with resentment and said, "Since you're here, don't think about leaving." "You." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. Meng Yiping said, "I don't have the strength, but the madam does." "Then do you know that I've already met the madam?" Qin Feiyang said playfully. Meng Yiping was shocked and lowered his head to look at the burly man and the others. The burly man nodded. "That's impossible. The madam clearly said that you're an enemy when she sees you in the future. Why would she let you go?" Meng Yiping's eyes were filled with disbelief. Whoosh! It was also at this moment that 3 figures appeared out of thin air above White Fox City. It was Fatso, Wolf King, and the pangolin. After washing the 3 major tribes with blood, there was no trace of blood on their bodies. However, because of the previous massacre, they were emitting a shocking, murderous aura. "Oh, it's quite lively." The pangolin chuckled and landed beside Qin Feiyang. He looked at Meng Yiping and said in surprise, "You're not dead yet?" Meng Yiping's face sank. It really is as the old saying goes. Good people don't live long, but disasters live for 1,000 years. However, Since I'm here, I'll be a good person and send you off." Killing intent flashed across the pangolin's eyes as it stretched out its claws, releasing a roaring battle chi. "Don't attack." Qin Feiyang's expression changed, and he hurriedly stopped the pangolin. But it was too late. Meng Yipping was killed on the spot by the battle chi, and not even his corpse was left behind. All that was left was a blood-curdling scream that reverberated between heaven and earth for a long time. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at the pangolin angrily and said, "What are you doing? Are you addicted to killing?" The pangolin was stunned. It looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion and asked, "Can I kill it?" Previously, when it saw Qin Feiyang and Meng Yipping confronting each other in the air, it thought that Qin Feiyang and the madam had completely fallen out. Therefore, it killed Meng Yipping without saying a word. But now, looking at Qin Feiyang's reaction, it didn't seem to be the case. Of course not. Qin Feiyang glared at it angrily and immediately opened a portal. "Let's go," he anxiously shouted and rushed toward the portal. Bang! However, before he could enter the portal, a terrifying pressure erupted from the large dot below. In an instant, that oppressive aura swept across the sky, firmly imprisoning the few of them in the air. What a strong pressure! What's the situation? Fatso and Wolf King were surprised. Whoosh! Then, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, the beautiful woman rushed out of the hall and landed in front of Qin Feiyang and the others. Her face was full of anger. This pressure is hers? Fatso, Wolf King, and the pangolin's eyes almost popped out. They had long guessed that this woman was very strong, but they didn't expect her to be so ridiculously strong. They had to be clear. Right now, they had already opened the 5th level of the Gate of Potential, and the pressure of the War Master could hardly restrain them. Unless it was a war sage. Qin Feiyang's face was also ashen and said, "Now that you know, why didn't I let you kill Meng Yipping? Why didn't you say so earlier?" The pangolin was furious. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "I wanted to say it, but did you give me the chance?" The Wolf King roared anxiously, "Can you all stop talking nonsense? Quickly think of a way." "I have no choice," Qin Feiyang said weakly. This pressure was too strong. Being imprisoned here, they couldn't even enter the castle. What else could they do? Moreover, even if they could enter the castle, as long as this madam stayed here, it would be enough to trap them to death. "Qin Feiyang, oh Qin Feiyang, I have already let you go, and I have also let bygones be bygones. I didn't expect that you would actually kill my people. How amazing! Now tell me, how should I deal with you?" At the same time, the beautiful woman looked at the 2 men and 2 beasts, her eyes frighteningly cold. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled, and he hurriedly said, "Senior, this is an accident." Yes. An accident. The pangolin, Fatso, and Wolf King also nodded. Accident? The beautiful woman smiled coldly, placed her hands in front of her chest, and quickly formed a seal. Wow! In an instant, for palm-sized pentagrams flew out from between her hands. They shone brightly and emitted an obscure aura. This is the enslavement seal. The 2 men and 2 beasts' expressions changed. "Wait," Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. "What is it?" The beautiful woman looked at him coldly. Qin Feiyang said, "Please let them go, just control me." "Do you think that's possible?" the beautiful woman teased. Qin Feiyang said, "They are all my followers, loyal and devoted. As long as I am controlled, they are also controlled by you." "Impossible." The beautiful woman shook her head and refused, and she didn't say any more nonsense. With a wave of her hand, the 4 pentagrams flew towards the top of the heads of the 2 men and 2 beasts. "If you don't agree, even if I am controlled by you, I will commit suicide on the spot," Qin Feiyang roared. The beautiful woman frowned and looked deeply at Qin Feiyang. In the end, with a thought, the 3 enslavement seals disintegrated in an instant. All right, I'll do as you wish and let them go. I'll only control you, but in the future, you'd better behave yourself. With that, she waved her hand, and the enslavement seal turned into a stream of light, instantly rushing into the top of Qin Feiyang's head. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom! Immediately, Qin Feiyang's mind seemed to explode with thunder. He felt as if his sea of consciousness was being torn apart. That intense pain caused his body and mind to tremble, and his face to distort. Moreover, although he couldn't see the situation in his sea of consciousness, he could clearly feel that his soul was being devoured by the enslavement seal. Seeing this, Fatso said anxiously, "We can't let Boss be controlled by her, Brother Wolf. Can you think of a way?" Wolf King said angrily, "If Brother had a way, he would have acted long ago. Why would he wait until now?" The pangolin at the side was full of self-blame. If it wasn't for its recklessness, all of this wouldn't have happened. It was it who harmed Qin Feiyang. Uft! At this time, Qin Feiyang suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his face pale. "Damn it! Fat Lord, fight it out with her." Fatso was so anxious that his eyes turned red and he was about to lose his mind. But at this time, strands of black light suddenly blossomed from Qin Feiyang's forehead. And, immediately, Fatso, Wolf King, the pangolin, and the beautiful woman all looked at the black light in surprise. At the same time, the moment the black light appeared, Qin Feiyang felt that the pain from his sea of consciousness had disappeared. Moreover, he could also sense that there was a mysterious force that trapped the enslavement seal in his sea of consciousness. What's the situation? He was a little stunned. Uft! Just when they were puzzled, the beautiful woman's body suddenly trembled, and a trace of blood actually flowed out from the corner of her mouth, and the pressure that trapped Qin Feiyang and the others also disappeared in an instant. What's going on? This sudden situation caused Qin Feiyang and the others to be extremely shocked. How is this possible? I actually suffered a backlash at the same time. The beautiful woman also looked at Qin Feiyang in shock, as if she had seen a ghost. Haha, this is retribution. Fatso and Wolf King suddenly laughed out loud. Although they didn't understand what was going on, seeing the beautiful woman suffer a big loss made them feel very happy. What are you laughing at? Run! Qin Feiyang secretly shouted. Fatso quivered and immediately opened another teleportation door. Then, the 2 men and 2 beasts fled for their lives. By the time the beautiful woman came back to her senses, they had already been teleported away. Damn it! The beautiful woman's face was gloomy as she shouted, "You 2 come up!" Old Man Snakeskin and the burly man looked at each other and hurriedly soared into the sky, standing respectfully in front of the beautiful woman. They should be going to Sky Thunder City. You 2 immediately go to Sky Thunder City and guard it. Once you find their whereabouts, immediately report to me. In addition, they might change their appearance. When you reach Sky Thunder City, immediately release the news. At that time, the people of Sky Thunder City will naturally use the Heaven's Eye Stone to investigate. The beautiful woman said. Yes, the 2 respectfully replied and opened the teleportation door to leave. Originally, I saw that you had some value and wanted to keep you, but I didn't expect you to have the ability to resist my slave seal. Looks like I have to kill you. The beautiful woman looked at the teleportation door that disappeared and muttered to herself. Her eyes flashed with shocking killing intent. Glacier forest. Above an ice mountain. Qin Feiyang and the rest appeared out of thin air. They all had a frightened look. A moment later, the pangolin walked to Qin Feiyang and lowered his head. I'm sorry, I'm the one who harmed you. If you want to hit or scold me, just come. I won't fight back. Then I'll really hit you? Qin Feiyang frowned and said with a straight face. Hit me. The pangolin nodded. Looking at the pangolin's face, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but find it funny. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. Take this as a lesson. Remember not to be so reckless in the future." Then he added, "At the end of the day, this is actually my fault. If I didn't insist on meeting her, this wouldn't have happened." The pangolin was stunned and smiled. "Thank you." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Fatso asked, "Boss, Fat Lord is puzzled. Why do you insist on meeting her?" "This woman is mysterious and unpredictable. For us, she's always a hidden danger. So, I want to see her attitude and test her strength. Who would have thought that something like this would happen?" Qin Feiyang was quite distressed. Chapter 745. But fortunately, there was no danger. But here came the question. Just now, what was the black light that emerged from the glabella? Qin Feiyang touched the glabella and didn't find anything strange. Fatso and Wolf King also looked at Qin Feiyang's glabella suspiciously. At that time, when the slave seal entered Qin Feiyang's skull, they were almost desperate. But they didn't expect that at the critical moment a black light would suddenly appear, not only resisting the slave seal's devouring, but also causing the beautiful woman to suffer a backlash. Wasn't this too bizarre? Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, and suddenly his eyes were filled with surprise. Could it be the ancient castle? Because only the ancient castle was stored in the glabella. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and the ancient castle rushed out from the glabella. It was palm-sized, dark all over, and exuded an ancient aura. But next to the ancient castle, there was something else. This was a pentagram. Imprisoned by wisps of black light, it was the slave seal. Did the ancient castle really help me? Qin Feiyang was extremely surprised. All along, the impression that the ancient castle gave him was just a space treasure that could be used to hide. But he didn't expect it to have such a terrifying power. It seemed that, as Lu Xingqian said, this ancient castle was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. At the same time, Fatso, Wolf King, and the pangolin also stared at the ancient castle and the slave seal, full of disbelief. After a while, everyone came back to their senses. Fatty immediately asked in confusion, "Boss, why do you think this ancient castle would imprison the enslavement seal?" "I don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head and raised his hand to touch the slave seal tentatively. As a result, he was shocked to find that this slave seal gave him a sense of familiarity. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang frowned. But just when he was puzzled, the ancient castle with the slave seal took the initiative to rush into Qin Feiyang's glabella. Following closely, Qin Feiyang felt a huge amount of information surging into his mind. Immediately, his gaze shook, and then he hurriedly sat down cross-legged in space and closed his eyes. His expression gradually fell into a peaceful state. At first glance, it looked as if it had fallen into a deep slumber. "What's going on?" Fatso and Wolf King looked at each other. They had no idea what Qin Feiyang was doing. The pangolin whispered, "Do you want to ask?" "Don't." Fatso stretched out his hand to stop it and said in a low voice, "Boss' current situation should be related to the enslavement seal. It's best that we don't disturb him, yes. If there is any danger, he will definitely ask us for help." Wolf King nodded. Next, Fatso and Wolf King stood around Qin Feiyang, protecting Qin Feiyang. Originally, they thought that Qin Feiyang would wake up soon, but as the days passed, Qin Feiyang showed no signs of waking up. "What's going on?" The pangolin couldn't help but start to worry. "Don't worry." Looking at his smooth breathing and stable aura, it shouldn't be like some kind of hidden danger. Fatso looked up and down at Qin Feiyang and whispered. Finally, seeing that Qin Feiyang hadn't woken up, they all sat cross-legged in the air and began to cultivate. Time flew by. A month passed. Early in the morning, Qin Feiyang, who had been motionless, suddenly raised his hands and placed them in front of his chest to form a seal. His movements were very complicated, and his speed was very slow. But as time passed, his speed became faster and faster, and there was an obscure aura that spread out from his hands. No one knew how much time had passed. Buzz. Finally, the void twisted and a palm-sized pentagram appeared between his hands, radiating a dazzling light. Hearing the commotion, Fatso and Wolf King opened their eyes one after another. When they saw the pentagram, their eyes widened. Wasn't this the slavery seal? Qin Feiyang could actually form the slavery seal. Was this a joke? Swoosh! Right at this moment, Qin Feiyang suddenly opened his eyes and two beams of light burst out. Fatso asked in surprise, "Boss, what's going on? How do you know the slavery seal?" Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso and lowered his head to look at the slavery seal floating in front of him with a hint of shock in his eyes. A moment later, with a wave of his hand, the slavery seal dissipated. He looked at Fatso and Wolf King and smiled. "This is all thanks to the castle." The man and the two beasts were even more puzzled. Qin Feiyang asked, "How long has it been?" Fatso said a month. "So fast?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Wolf King urged impatiently, Hey, little Qin Zi, don't keep us in suspense, okay?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Do you remember a month ago the castle took the initiative to rush into my glabella with the slavery seal?" The man and the two beasts nodded. "After the castle and the slavery seal entered my glabella, I immediately felt a huge amount of information pouring into my mind." At this point, Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously and said, "Take a guess. What do you think the contents of this information are?" "Slavery seal?" Wolf King raised his eyebrows and asked. "Yes, it's the slavery seal. And it's the cultivation method of the slavery seal, as well as the method to break it," Qin Feiyang said. "What?" Hearing it, Fatso and Wolf King were dumbfounded. Qin Feiyang continued, "At that time, I also felt that it was inconceivable, so I immediately comprehended it. I didn't expect that I would really succeed." This, the man and the two beasts looked at each other. What Qin Feiyang said, in their eyes, felt like a fantasy story. It was too unreal. Fatso asked, "Then what exactly is this slavery seal?" The slavery seal is to forcefully control a person's soul and sign a master and servant contract. And once the soul is controlled, unless the master takes the initiative to remove it, the slavery seal will remain for the rest of your life. But the slavery seal also has a fatal flaw, and that is that it can only control creatures of the same realm as itself, as well as creatures of a lower cultivation base than itself. For example, I can only control people below the 4-star War Master level. Qin Feiyang said, "What if their cultivation base is higher than yours?" Wolf King asked. "If their cultivation base is higher than mine, they will suffer from a backlash. And the higher the other party's cultivation base, the more serious the backlash will be. It will even hurt my own soul." Qin Feiyang said. Fatso said, "In that case, the slavery seal is actually a double-edged sword." "That's right. But as long as you successfully control the other party, you will be a slave for life." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. TSK. I didn't expect this castle to be so powerful." Fatso was speechless. "Yeah, I didn't expect the castle to have this ability either. Actually, the slavery seal is very profound, but the castle seems to have broken it down. Many complicated things have become very simple. Without its help, I'm afraid that even after a few more years, I wouldn't be able to comprehend it." As Qin Feiyang said this, with a thought, the castle appeared once again. Looking at the castle, the two men and the two beasts sighed. Wolf King said with a sneaky smile, "Speaking of which, we can be considered to have profited from a disaster this time." "That's right. That woman definitely wouldn't have dreamed that Boss would be able to control the slavery seal so easily. Fatso chuckled. He really wanted to tell that woman now and see what kind of expression she would have. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly, put away the castle, and said, "Let's go. It's time to go to Sky Thunder City." Fatso was stunned and said in surprise, "You really plan to snatch the Sky Thunder Flame?" "If there's a chance, I definitely won't miss it. But my main goal is still Muqing." Qin Feiyong said, "What does this have to do with Muqing?" Wolf King was puzzled. "Of course it has something to do with it. Think about it, since Muqing has such a terrifying family background, why did he go to the Pill Tower back then?" Qin Feiyong said. Fatso said in realization, "That's right, back then he and Mu Shui entered the Pill Tower with you. And with his family background, there's indeed no need to enter the Pill Tower. So he must have entered the Pill Tower back then with some purpose. We can follow this clue and find him. I believe that we will be able to find him sooner or later." Qin Feiyong sneered, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Sky Thunder City. Outside the city, wind and snow covered, and the cold current was bone-piercing. However, it was warm inside the city. All of this was because of the Sky Thunder Flame. The heat emitted by the heavenly thunder flame prevented the cold currents from invading. This city, which was not very big, was like a paradise. However, this paradise was currently in an uproar. Just a month ago, not long after Fatso and Wolf King massacred the 3 major tribes, this matter spread in Sky Thunder City. In addition to being shocked, everyone was speculating who massacred the 3 major tribes. Because of this matter, the city lord of Sky Thunder City even personally went to the 3 major tribes to investigate. But after a round of investigation, he did not find anything suspicious in the ruins of the 3 major tribes. But not long after, a piece of news suddenly came from Sky Thunder City. Qin Feiyong was back. Hearing this name, everyone in the Sky Thunder City instantly boiled over. Of course they remembered this name, and it was hard to forget. Even for most people, the 3 words Qin Feiyong was a nightmare. And after the city lord learned of this matter, he immediately ordered to strictly investigate everyone who entered and left the city. At the same time, he was also looking forward to Qin Feiyong's arrival, because the debt from back then had not been settled yet. Moreover, he was already suspecting that the people who massacred the 3 major tribes might be Qin Feiyong's group. In the sky outside the city, goose-feather-heavy snow floated. The ground was covered in white snow. A young man wearing tiger skin walked alone on a small path outside the city. He was about 1.75 meters tall, his body was thin, his appearance was very ordinary, and his aura was not strong. Even if someone brushed past him, they would not take a second look at him. But if one observed carefully, they would find that this person's eyes were deep, revealing a kind of sharpness that ordinary people could not compare to. And at the same time, this young man also turned a blind eye to the pedestrians coming and going. He curiously looked at the surrounding scenery with a faint smile on his face. However, when this young man saw the situation at the city gate, his pupils shrank slightly with a trace of surprise. Outside the city gate, there was a long line of hundreds of people, and on both sides of the city gate, there were more than 10 guards, each of them holding a Heaven's Eye stone. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.